Chapter 500. Ha. Is that so? Forget it then. Big brother. Lead everyone and start attacking the mountain. Yes. Hurry up and attack the mountain. Don't waste time. Dugu Feiying scratched his head awkwardly and said, although he was trying to cover it up, the second half of what he said still made sense. Li Zishuan agreed. Feiying is right. Xian, let's attack the mountain quickly. Let's take down Snake Spirit Mountain before the sky turns dark. Dugu Xian's mouth twitched. Xian, my foot. However, when faced with such a shameless fellow, even if he wanted to object to this name, it was still ineffective. All right, I'll tell him a few things and start attacking the mountain. Finally, Dugu Xian nodded and walked out of the tent. He began to mobilize the 4,000 Imperial Guards in an unusually simple manner. All right, all in all, you're about to face a group of Jianghu ruffians who don't listen to His Majesty's orders. As the most elite Northern Yamen Imperial Army, if you are defeated, I want to see how you can stay in Chang'an City. So, everyone, be on your guard and take note of any unexpected risks in the mountain. The brave will be rewarded, and the cowards will be punished. Don't let the pugilistic world people look down on the Northern Yamen Imperial Guards. Do you hear me? Li Zishuan, Dugu Feng, Academician Qin, and Academician Wang chatted for a while in the tent. After leaving the tent, he heard Dugu Xian talking to the soldiers. Roar! I hear you. The Northern Yamen Imperial Guards will never retreat. The Northern Yamen Imperial Guards will never be a laughing stock. The Northern Yamen Imperial Guards will never retreat. The Northern Yamen Imperial Guards will never be a laughing stock. The Northern Yamen Imperial Guards will never retreat. The Northern Yamen Imperial Guards will never be a laughing stock. The response to Dugu Xian was a heart-wrenching roar from the 4,000 soldiers of the Imperial Army. Li Zishuan felt the entire forest tremble. Compared to the army of more than 10,000 people he had brought with him, this army of only 4,000 was clearly more imposing. Just from this aura, one could see that this was a powerful army. Of course, Dugu Xian's ability to motivate the Imperial Army with just a few words was truly commendable. Clang! Dugu Xian unsheathed the sword at his waist and pointed it at the sky. Let's move out. Attack the mountain. Yes. All the soldiers roared in agreement. The group of more than 4,000 people began to move in an orderly manner toward the mountain pass of the Snake Spirit Mountain not far away. Li Zishuan patted Dabai's head and told it to wait at the foot of the mountain. Then, he picked up the wind-chasing sword and chased after Dugu Xian. He had to participate in this attack, but he wouldn't bring Dabai along. The poison in the Snake Spirit Mountain was a fatal threat to Dabai. After all, the antidote developed by the two doctors from the Imperial Physician Department was only effective on humans. No one knew if it would be effective on horses. Li Zishuan also didn't want to use Dabai as a test subject. In any case, the mountain passes in the Snake Spirit Mountain were rugged, and there were very few places where horses could be used. Moreover, his instincts told him that this attack on the Snake Spirit Mountain would definitely not be a smooth one. On the contrary, it was very likely that there would be great danger. Li Zishuan couldn't explain why he felt that way. If he had to give a reason, it could only be a man's intuition. Hello. Dabai wanted to chase after its master, who had always been very close to it, when it saw that its master was about to leave. However, it was pulled back by the reins tied to the tree. It anxiously and sadly let out two strange and sorrowful cries in Li Zishuan's direction. Dabai understood human nature. It could feel the heaviness in Li Zishuan's heart, so it was very anxious. Li Zishuan felt a little uncomfortable when he heard that. However, he didn't have any confidence in protecting anyone's life in this mysterious Snake Spirit Mountain, let alone a horse. After all, the cultivation of the sect leader of the Seven Cultivators sect was terrifying. It was comparable to some of the martial uncles in the Celestial Master sect in his memories. The Northern Imperial Army will never retreat. The Northern Imperial Army will never be a laughing stock. On the Snake Spirit Mountain, at this moment, the deafening roars of the Imperial Army could be faintly heard from the foot of the mountain. Batian and the Snake King were both people with profound inner strength. Even though they were in the stone room, they could still hear the faint roars. They are starting to attack the mountain. This army is actually the Northern Imperial Army. Our 7 Cultivators sect's opponent this time is really terrifying. Batian's expression suddenly changed. He clasped his hands behind his back and muttered to himself, "Senior Marshal Brother, so what if it's the Northern Imperial Army? As the saying goes, capture the ringleader to capture the bandits. You are a peak Grandmaster expert. When they are exhausted by the poisonous miasma, ambush, and harassment in the mountain, won't it be fine if you capture Li Zishuan and the Northern Imperial Army's commander?" The Snake King rolled his eyes and smiled sinisterly. Batian didn't buy it. He shook his head and said, "Things aren't as simple as you think. The Northern Imperial Army is the elite of the elite in the Chong, an Imperial Army. Li Shimon's most reliable cavalry was selected from the Northern Imperial Army. It is said that the Northern Imperial Army is not only good at chaotic battles between hundreds of thousands of troops, but also good at coordination. With 500 Northern Imperial Army soldiers, they are not afraid of any Jianghu experts. That includes Grandmasters. Once they attack the mountain, Li Zishuan and the commander of the Northern Yamen Imperial Army will definitely be heavily protected. If I try to capture them and get caught in the formation of the Northern Yamen Imperial Army, I'm afraid I won't be able to get out." Snake King was not as cultured as Batian. He was slightly taken aback as he was slightly intimidated by the might of the Northern Yamen's Imperial Army. After a while, he said, "But Senior Marshal Brother, don't forget that our Snake Spirit Mountain has a poisonous miasma. No matter how strong the Northern Imperial Army is, they will have to lie down after a quarter of an hour, right? At that time, won't we be able to torture Li Zishuan and the Imperial Army's commander, however we want to torture them?" Batian wasn't as optimistic as the Snake King. In fact, he hadn't been calm for the past 2 days. At this moment, he could only shake his head and say, "Junior Marshal Brother, you should recuperate first. I'll go check on the defense of the sect's disciples. The Imperial Court's people are attacking. Smash them. Smash them." At the first checkpoint of the mountain path, the disciples of the 7 Cultivators sect who had been lying in ambush discovered the Imperial Army's invasion. Therefore, they took advantage of the fact that the Imperial Army was only 10 feet away to launch an attack. One after another, huge boulders rolled down from above. The soldiers in the front row, who couldn't dodge in time, were immediately smashed to the ground. Even the Imperial Army behind them fell backward one after another, just like the dominoes. Bam! 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 At the critical moment, Li Zishuan flew to the front of the group and kicked the rapidly falling boulders to the side. Facing the rolling boulders, Li Zishuan started his fancy football performance. After experiencing the initial chaos, the group quickly calmed down. Seeing that Li Zishuan was having fun alone in front of the group, they all went up to help him. The first annihilation crisis was instantly resolved. Chapter 501. Smash! Quickly. The soldiers are coming up. Once they come up, we will all be beheaded. Smash as hard as you can. Aya! Li Zishuan's eyes were sharp. He saw a middle-sized man in black clothes at the corner of the mountain path ahead. The man was trying his best to urge the disciples of the 7 Cultivators of true virtue to move the rocks. He seemed to be the leader of the group. Li Zishuan lifted his leg and kicked the rock, hitting the leader's forehead. The leader screamed miserably and rolled down the side of the forest before he could call for help. The mountain path of Snake Spirit Mountain was extremely narrow. If an ambush was arranged in advance at every turn, it would indeed be possible for one man to hold the pass against 10,000 men. This was because although there were many troops attacking the mountain, only one person was allowed to pass at a time. In a team of more than 4,000 people, only one person could fight at a time. It had to be said that Snake King's initial plan was really good. If other troops had encountered such a perfect ambush, they would have suffered heavy losses. However, Li Zishuan's tyrannical strength and explosive power directly destroyed Snake King's plan. Among the more than 4,000 people present, Li Zishuan was the only one who could kick a boulder that weighed several hundred kilograms like a football. This was the effect of an expert in a chaotic battle that could decide the outcome with a single strike. Yeah, second senior brother is dead. Quickly run, run, run. At the first corner, the dozen or so disciples of the 7 cultivators of true virtue saw that their leader had been beaten down the mountain and began to scatter. In fact, when they saw the powerful army just now, they were already scared. Had it not been for someone watching over them, they would have run away long ago. Now that their leader was dead, how could they not run? After all, since ancient times, the common people didn't fight with the officials. People like Snake King and Embark, who were ruthless enough to go against the imperial court, were few and far between. Run, run. These soldiers aren't afraid of the poison at all. The 7 cultivators of true virtue is done for. Let's run. There was a large army blocking the path below, so they definitely wouldn't be able to cross it. Therefore, they could only go to the 7 cultivators of true virtue on the mountain path. These people didn't want to go back, so they had no choice but to run toward the forest and cliffs on both sides of the mountain path. Fortunately, this position was not very high from the foot of the mountain. Even if he accidentally fell down, as long as he protected his vital parts, he would not lose his life. Li Zishuan gestured to the imperial guards not to pursue these deserters. He was only interested in Snake King and Embark. As for these disciples of the 7 cultivators of true virtue, as long as they didn't help the tyrant, Li Zishuan didn't want to make things difficult for them. Keep marching. Dugu Xan furrowed his brows. After seeing that the disciples of the 7 cultivators of true virtue had already run away, he waved his hand and gave an order. Yes, the imperial army regained their morale and continued to climb the dangerous Snake Spirit Mountain. Sect leader, oh no, oh no. The first checkpoint has been broken through by the imperial court's army. Embark came out of the stone room. Just as he was about to go down the mountain to check on the current situation, he saw a disciple running over while panting. What? How could they be so fast? Weren't there dozens of boulders there? Embark's expression changed greatly. He opened his eyes wide and said in disbelief, "It's true, sect leader. Second senior brother was killed on the spot, and the rest of the disciples fled in all directions. The imperial court's army is now marching toward the second checkpoint." The messenger disciple said with a sad face, "Oomph, this old man will go and take a look myself." Embark flicked his sleeves and walked down the mountain with a cold face. "Hee, you want to use your petty tricks again?" On the mountain path, the army soon arrived at the second turning point. Li Zishuan sneered and started to attack. However, he wasn't fighting alone this time. The imperial army had experienced the sneak attack at the first checkpoint, and they were already mentally prepared. They cooperated with each other and started to block the rolling boulders. Dugu Xan and Dugu Feiying, the 2 experts, also copied Li Zishuan's methods and helped to attack the 7 cultivators sect disciples at the checkpoint with stones or throwing knives. Hurry up! Hurry up! We can't let the imperial court's army go up the mountain. Ugh! Save me! Fang Gongming, give me a hand! Hurry up and run! We can't hold on any longer. We can't hold on any longer. Once the imperial court's people come up, we will all be beheaded." Accompanied by a burst of crying, begging for mercy, and fleeing, the second checkpoint of the 7 cultivators sect was quickly broken through. After a short rest, the army set off on their journey again. However, Li Zishuan wasn't happy because of this. He had a strange feeling in his heart. His intuition told him that the attack on a mountain wouldn't go so smoothly. There would definitely be some unexpected dangers later. Little Xian, what kind of bullshit 7 cultivators sect is this? Aside from Snake King and their sect master, the others aren't that great. Dugu Feiying walked on a mountain path and laughed complacently with his hands on his waist. In the second checkpoint, his throwing knives killed 3 or 4 disciples of the 7 cultivators sect. It could be said that he had made a great contribution. Therefore, he was now looking down on everyone in the world. Feiying, don't be so happy too early. We haven't even reached half of the mountain yet. Snake King and Embark haven't come out yet, so we mustn't lower our guard. No one knew what tricks they were going to play next. This Spirit Snake Mountain is very strange. It's not as simple as you and I think. Li Zixuan patted Dugu Feiying's shoulder and said with a serious face. Dugu Feiying waved his hand and said indifferently, Haha, little Xian, you're thinking too much. Snake King and Yin Batian might be good at martial arts, but we have 4,000 Imperial Guards behind us. No matter how good they are, they won't be able to escape from the encirclement of the Imperial Guards. Therefore, this Spirit Snake Mountain is ours for the taking. You. Li Zixuan gritted his teeth. This brat really doesn't listen to anything when he's being cocky. It's really annoying. Cough, cough. Feiying. Little Xian is right. When marching to war, we can't be complacent at all times. Otherwise, we'll definitely lose. It's better to be careful in everything. Dugu Xian couldn't stand this idiot of a younger brother anymore and also advised him. Ugh. Dugu Feiying rubbed his nose and nodded. Okay, big brother, I know. I'll be careful. Perfunctory. Li Zixuan could tell at a glance that his brother was being perfunctory. He turned to Dugu Xian and said, Xian, tell them to be more vigilant. I keep feeling that something is wrong. Our journey has been too smooth. Yin Batian shouldn't have only prepared these tricks for us. Chapter 502. Bastards. A bunch of trash. Such a good location and so many rolling stones. But they couldn't even stop them for an hour. What a bunch of trash. On a boulder above the mountain path, Yin Batian watched the army break through the second line of defense and couldn't help but curse out loud. Sect leader, what should we do? Many of our disciples died at the hands of the 3 leaders in the previous 2 checkpoints. The 3 of them are very accurate with their stones and throwing knives. As soon as our people show their faces, they will attack us. They are about to reach this checkpoint. What should we do? A tall young man beside Yin Batian mustered up his courage and asked. Although Yin Batian's arrival calmed him down a little, he still couldn't help but feel nervous in the face of such a strong army. Lu Duong, I'm here. What are you afraid of? Yin Batian snorted in dissatisfaction. Then, he frowned as if he suddenly thought of something and asked, That's not right. Why aren't these people poisoned yet? It hasn't been an hour since they entered the mountain, but it should be at least half an hour, right? No matter how strong their Nigong is, they should be lying on the ground now. This, sect leader, I don't know either. But could they have gotten our sect's poison prevention pill, or the formula of the poison prevention pill from Lu Baodan? The man named Lu Duong frowned and thought for a while before guessing. That's impossible, Yin Batian denied. The formula of the poison prevention pill is the sect's top secret. Lu Baodan is just a cook. How could you know about it? Also, the sect gives out the poison prevention pill once every 7 days. Even if Lu Baodan has her own collection, it's impossible for her to give out so many poison prevention pills to a 4,000-strong army. Huh? It seems like the people from the Imperial Court have found a way to break the poison barrier. Lu Duong panicked and didn't know what to do. I'm afraid it's just as you said. Looks like we can't rely on the Imperial Court to stall for time. We have to end this quickly. Duong, tell them to hide behind the rolling stones and not show their heads when they throw them. Then, go to the 4th checkpoint and ask Su Qingfeng to bring a group of people and bring over the good gift that I have carefully prepared for the Imperial Army. Yin Batian's eyes flashed fiercely as he ordered in a deep voice. Lu Duong didn't ask what Yin Batian's great gift was. Instead, he cupped his hands and replied, Yes, sect leader. With that, he turned around and went to make the arrangements. Yin Batian stood where he was and looked at the approaching Imperial army. He muttered to himself, This is not the only trick I have up my sleeve. Li Zixuan, Dugu Xian, since you didn't give this old man face earlier, don't blame this old man for being impolite now. Hee, little Xian, look. The previous checkpoint was also a rolling stone. Didn't I say that old man Yin Batian had run out of tricks? No matter how you play, you only know this one move. Ha! Good timing. My mystic leaf flying dagger can't wait any longer. On the mountain path, Dugu Feiying couldn't help but tug at Li Zixuan's arm and laugh when he saw the huge stones in front of them. Li Zixuan saw the huge stones before Dugu Feiying did. He couldn't help but frown. But I still feel that something is wrong. Feiying, be careful. Swoosh. Splat. Smack. When Dugu Feiying heard Li Zixuan's sudden shout, he couldn't help but be puzzled. Who knew that as soon as Li Zixuan's voice fell, he saw a cold light. With a swish sound, a cloud of blood blossomed in the air, and then his face was tragically sprayed with blood. At the same time, a green flower snake that was cut in two fell to the ground with a paw sound. Li Zixuan was talking when he saw a snake on a tree beside Dugu Feiying. It was sticking out its tongue as it approached Dugu Feiying. It seemed like it wanted to kiss Dugu Feiying. So, in a moment of desperation, he used his wind-chasing sword as a flying dagger and cut the snake in half. Damn, snake? It's a snake. Little Xian, hurry up and take it away. This is so scary. Dugu Feiying was stunned for a few seconds before he regained his senses. But when he took a closer look, he was scared out of his wits. He quickly jumped to the side and shouted. He was just short of crying for his parents. Li Zixuan couldn't help but laugh. Huh, I didn't expect Feiying to be so scared at your age. I've been bitten by a snake. Help. I've been bitten too. So many snakes. Oh my God, there's so many snakes. Help, I've been bitten too. Before Li Zixuan could finish speaking, he heard cries for help rising and falling from the ranks of the Imperial Army. He looked around and immediately saw countless small, unknown snakes that were joining in the fun in the crowd. Li Zixuan raised an eyebrow and channeled his chi into his voice, shouting, Brotherly, I'm going to kill you. Quiet. Everyone, take out your realgar powder and scatter it as you walk. Yes, sir. After going through the previous two checkpoints, the Imperial Army had a better understanding of Li Zixuan's martial arts realm. People with strength would be respected wherever they went. Therefore, Li Zixuan's words were quite effective. All the soldiers hurriedly took out a large bag of realgar powder from their bags and followed Li Zixuan's instructions, scattering the realgar powder as they walked. Hiss, hiss, hiss. Finally, a bizarre scene appeared. When Li Zixuan saw the realgar powder, he thought that the snake army would retreat immediately. Who knew that at this moment, a strange and melodious tune could be heard. The snakes paused for a moment on the road. Then, not only did they not retreat, but they immediately rushed toward the army as if they had changed into another person. Oh no, it should be that they had changed into another snake. They rushed toward the army and quickly approached them. Li Zixuan's expression changed, and he knew something was wrong. As mentioned earlier, realgar wine and realgar powder had a certain repelling effect on snakes. When snakes encountered these two things, they would choose to avoid them if they had other choices. Now, there should be someone controlling these snakes. Otherwise, these snakes wouldn't be able to endure their fear of realgar powder and attack the army. Not good. Everyone, stop moving forward. 5 people form a team and help each other look behind. Kill snakes if you see them. Don't get bitten by these poisonous snakes. Li Zixuan made a hand gesture, and the army immediately stopped moving forward. He ordered the army behind him as he killed the poisonous snakes around him. Chapter 503. Snake Spirit Mountain, halfway up the mountain. Tens of thousands of venomous snakes, under the control of that strange tune, charged fearlessly at the 4,000 Imperial Army soldiers. Although many of the snakes couldn't break through the swords of the Imperial Army soldiers, and many of them couldn't even touch the sleeves of the soldiers before they were cut into pieces, they still didn't know what fear was and continued to charge at the Imperial Army soldiers. Just thinking about the scene of tens of thousands of venomous snakes in one place made one's scalp tingle. Although the Imperial Army soldiers were elite soldiers who had experienced hundreds of battles, the ones they had fought before were living humans and not these densely packed venomous creatures. Why can't these venomous snakes be killed? My arms are sore from cutting them. F***CK. How dare you bite me? I'll chop you up. Help! I've been poisoned. I've been bitten too. The 4,000 Imperial Army soldiers obeyed Li Zixuan's orders and formed small groups of 5. They formed a circle with their backs against each other to resist the attacks of the venomous snake army. However, The venomous snakes in front of them seemed to be endless. After killing one, 4 or 5 more would come. As time passed, the entire mountain was filled with venomous snakes. The stamina of the Imperial Army soldiers was rapidly depleted by the venomous snakes' attacks. More and more soldiers were bitten by the venomous snakes, but the attacks of the venomous snakes didn't weaken at all. Xiaoxian, we have to think of something. We can't go on like this. Who knows how many snakes there are on this snake spirit mountain? Dugu Feiying used his sword to parry the venomous snakes around him as he spoke to Li Zishuan at the top of his voice. This unlucky child was only good at throwing knives, but his other abilities were mediocre. However, he couldn't possibly use his throwing knives to kill the snakes, right? In this endless sea of snakes, even if he carried a sack of throwing knives, it wouldn't be enough to kill them all. This fellow clearly knew this as well. He had gotten a sword from somewhere and was now completely relying on his speed and strength as a middle-stage chi-forming cultivator to fend off the venomous snakes from all directions. However, this kind of method of wielding the sword without any technique also caused his vital energy to be depleted very quickly. In less than 15 minutes, he was already panting. Indeed, we have to think of something. Although these poisonous snakes were annoying, they posed no threat to Li Zishuan, who had entered the Master Realm. They didn't even consume much of his genuine qi. Firstly, his current realm was too high. Secondly, his Taiji swordsmanship could both attack and defend. Its moves were exquisite, and it didn't consume much genuine qi. Although the snakes could not threaten Li Zishuan had to consider the bigger picture. If he allowed the situation to continue, the army would suffer heavy losses. Li Zishuan looked around and finally fixed his gaze on Batian, who was playing the sun on a boulder not far away. The reason why he could recognize that the oval-shaped object in Batian's hand was because he had seen pictures of it on the internet in his previous life. However, today was the first time he had seen someone play a tune on his sun. Suns were made of clay, so it was very difficult to play a tune on them. Xian, Feiying, these snakes were all attracted by Batian. The 3 of us should work together to kill him. Otherwise, there will be more and more snakes. In the end, these 4,000 people will either be poisoned to death or die of exhaustion. Li Zishuan said to Dugu Xian and Dugu Feiying after using White Tiger's Tail and Sweeping Wind Plum Blossom to kill all the venomous snakes within 3 feet of him. F***CK. Is this what you've come up with? Dugu Feiying almost vomited blood when he heard this. Batian was at the peak of the Master Realm. The 3 of them were like small shrimps in front of him. How could they possibly defeat him with such a huge difference in realm? What? Isn't Batian at the peak of the Master Realm? He's not even a Grandmaster. Feiying, why are you so afraid? The 3 of us dared to fight the Snake King, who was at the middle stage of the Master Realm. Now that I'm at the Master Realm and have the help of the Imperial Army, we might have a chance. Li Zishuan understood what Dugu Feiying was thinking. In fact, he didn't expect that the siege of the 7 Cultivators sect would turn into a battle between 2 kings. He had the Imperial Army behind him, so he would be crazy to fight Batian. However, now that things had developed to this point, he wouldn't be at ease for the rest of his life if he didn't stand up. However, if they cooperated well in this battle, there was still a chance for them to win. Ooh, who's afraid? Let's do it. I'm not afraid. Dugu Feiying straightened his neck and quibbled. Then he looked at Dugu Xian and asked, Big brother, what do you think? Are you going to do it or not? Although Dugu Feiying didn't show any fear on his face, he was feeling guilty. After thinking about it, he could only seek comfort from his elder brother. Dugu Xian frowned. In the end, he was a general, and it was his duty to lead the army to war. He didn't like this kind of Jianghu struggle and trying to be a hero. Last time, he was forced to fight the Flying Snake King because of the situation. But this time, if he didn't take action, the 4,000 Imperial Army soldiers would probably be in big trouble. Let's do it. Dugu Xian's words were always concise and to the point. However, for such an ambiguous word to come out of the mouth of a cold-faced general, it sounded weird no matter how one listened to it. In any case, Li Zishuan almost laughed out loud. Dugu Feiying opened his mouth. Since his brother also supported Li Zishuan's king versus king plan, What else could he say? He could only follow along. Haha, good. Today, we'll fight side by side again. So what if he's at the peak of the Master Realm? Beat his mother. What's there to be afraid of? When Lisa Xuan saw Dugufeng and Dugufeng come over and stand by his side, he could not help but recall the scene of the three of them beating up the flying serpent. He immediately became filled with pride and could not help but laugh at the sky. Bah, you're right. Isn't it just peak Grandmaster? What's there to be afraid of? Don't be afraid, just do it. Dugufeng was at the prime of his youth. After being provoked, he was also a little hot-blooded. He spat at Baishan's direction and said arrogantly, "Cut the crap. If you want to fight, then fight." Dugufeng raised his sword and said unhappily, "Okay, let's fight our way out first." Li Zishuan wiped his nose, raised his chasing wind sword, and charged in Baishan's direction. Batian was old and shrewd. He knew that he should not be distracted when he was controlling the snakes, so he was now more than a mile away from the battlefield. As for how his snort could be heard from such a distance, there was no doubt at all. As a martial arts master at the peak of the Grandmaster realm, he had the ability to let the entire Snake Spirit Mountain hear his voice. Swords were drawn, and the battle of king versus king was about to start. Chapter 504. Kiki. Juniors, you have the guts to challenge this old man. You are courageous, but you will pay with your lives. On top of a boulder on the mountain path, Batian looked at Li Zishuan, Dugufeng, and Dugufeng, who were charging towards him from the Sea of Snakes. If Li Zishuan and the others had stayed with the Imperial Army, Batian wouldn't have been able to do anything to them. After all, no Jianghu expert would dare to go against the Imperial Army. But now that Li Zishuan, Dugufeng, and the others had left the army and were going to have a king versus king battle with him, Batian was very happy. In the end, the reason why he brought these snakes to the battle was because the 7 Cultivators sect had too few disciples. There were less than 100 of them, and they wouldn't be able to defeat them in a head-on battle. Moreover, it would be too dangerous to capture their leader. After all, the elite Imperial Army wasn't afraid of any Jianghu expert. Now that Li Zishuan and the others had delivered themselves to his doorstep, it was exactly what Batian wanted. Although fighting with Li Zishuan and the others would affect his control over the snakes, there were already so many snakes on a mountain path that they could at least buy some time. As long as he could defeat Li Zishuan and Dugufeng before the Imperial Army got rid of the snakes, the crisis of the 7 Cultivators sect would be resolved in an instant. The victor is yet to be decided. Batian, this Duke will ask you one last time. Are you really not willing to hand over the Snake King? Li Zishuan, Dugufeng, and Dugufeng jumped onto the platform opposite of Batian and said coldly. He wasn't talking nonsense before the battle. He was also trying to buy time for the Imperial Army to get rid of the snakes. His 5 senses were sharp, and he had already noticed that the snakes on the mountain paused for a moment when Batian was talking to them. This meant that Baishan's control over the snakes had a time limit. As long as he could buy some time, the snakes would definitely be able to break free from Baishan's control. Duke Li, you're doomed to waste your efforts. 15 minutes is more than enough to get rid of the 3 of you. Batian smiled indifferently. Although he was well aware of Li Zishuan's intention of stalling for time, he didn't care at all. He slowly put away the sun, drew out the long sword at his waist, and pointed it at Li Zishuan and the other 2. Haha, I remember that the Snake King said something similar a month ago, but I'm sorry to disappoint you. I'm still alive and well, but the Snake King has become an earthworm that doesn't even dare to step out of his house. Li Zishuan retorted without fear. Haha, that's right. What bullshit Snake King? His name is quite impressive, and he is also a master at the Grandmaster middle stage. When he saw me, a junior at the Qi middle stage, didn't he run away? Haha, it was unknown whether it was intentional or not, but Dugufeng, who was watching from the side, didn't mind the commotion and added fuel to the fire. This guy was laughing with his hands on his waist. Coupled with what he said just now, if the Snake King were here, he would definitely be pissed to death. Batian was very close to the Snake King, and he was also very angry. A trace of anger finally appeared on his indifferent face. He waved his sword and snorted coldly. Junior, you're courting death. As soon as he finished speaking, Batian disappeared with his sword. Li Zishuan's pupil shrank, and he shouted, Fei, get out of the way! Boom! As soon as Batian finished speaking, Dugu Fei realized that he was in great danger. He felt as if he was being stared at by a ferocious beast, and his entire body was filled with an extremely cold, murderous intent. He couldn't even move if he wanted to. Li Zishuan's shout seemed to have some kind of magical power that warmed up his cold inner breath slightly. Only then did he have the ability to move. The moment he turned his body, he felt a long sword as cold as water slashing down on the hair on his face. Dugu Fei was so scared that he immediately used all his inner force to jump to the side. The place where he was just standing was instantly blasted into a big pit. How terrifying! The power of a peak grandmaster was indeed terrifying. The dust settled. Li Zishuan, Dugu Xen, and Dugu Fei all had the same thought. As the person involved, Dugu Fei was undoubtedly the one who felt it the most. At this moment, he felt so bitter in his heart. He regretted agreeing to Li Zishuan to come over and cause trouble. They weren't causing trouble, they were risking their lives. When Batian disappeared from the spot earlier, only Li Zishuan among the three of them saw his footwork in the air. Dugu Xen and Dugu Fei could only see a series of afterimages. Almost in the blink of an eye, Batian flew down from above Dugu Fei's head. Bashan's furious attack was obviously more powerful and aggressive than the one he used to test Li Zishuan at the foot of the mountain yesterday. If there were no accidents, this sword would definitely pierce through Dugu Fei's body from the top of his head, and Dugu Fei would definitely die. Unfortunately, there were many accidents in reality, and Dugu Fei was still alive and well. Bashan's sure kill attack missed. Ow! I've underestimated you juniors. To think that there are actually people who can survive my Chinkoan sword. I'd like to see how long a sharp-tongued brat like you can live. Batian was slightly surprised, and without saying anything, he raised his sword and continued to attack Dugu Fei. As for Li Zishuan and Dugu Xen, Batian couldn't be bothered with them. He only wanted to take care of Dugu Fei first before thinking about anything else. This was the best thing about our Dugu Fei. Once in a battle, he would definitely pull the enemy's aggro to the max and give his teammates a lot of room to attack. But this was also the most tragic thing about Dugu Fei. Because he attracted too much aggro, he was going to be tortured. And he wasn't a big meat shield like Cheng Yao Jin or Yu Qigong. He was still a pretty boy. How could he accept Bashan's cruel torture? F***CK. Old bastard, you're still not done playing? You think I'm easy to bully? Then I'll let you have a taste of my power. When Dugu Fei saw that Batian was still going to attack, he couldn't help but scream. He jumped far away, and then took out dozens of flying knives from his pants and threw them all at Batian, as if they were free. Dozens of flying knives flew towards Batian. Li Zishuan, who was about to help Dugu Fei block the attack, couldn't help but have his eyes lit up. Dugu Fei's flying knives had improved a lot compared to when he was fighting Flying Snake. Not to mention other things, even if Flying Snake could block this rain of flying knives, it wouldn't be easy for him. This was enough to explain the problem. Although their opponents were more than one level stronger than Flying Snake, the three of them had also improved, and they might not lose this battle. Chapter 505. Bam, 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 bam. With the sound of swords clashing against each other, Batian managed to nullify Dugu Fei's extraordinary move with just a few slashes. Even so, the three of them didn't look disappointed. They knew that even if Dugu Fei had improved a lot, he wouldn't be able to injure Batian with his flying daggers. They were already satisfied that they were able to hold Batian back for a few seconds with their flying daggers. In a fight between experts, life and death was decided in a second. Even though it wasn't as exaggerated as they said, the time that Dugu Fei had bought was enough for Li Zishuan and Dugu Xen to do a lot of things. 9 Taishian swords, first style, ride the wind. riding the wind to the 9 heavens. At this crucial moment, to save Dugu Feiying, Li Zixuan did not plan to use the Taiji sword technique. He wanted to use his best, fiercest, and fastest sword move without holding back. Only then could he save Dugu Feiying. Otherwise, this pretty boy wouldn't be able to survive for more than 2 seconds under Yin Beishan's attack. Lone Wind's swordplay. Almost at the same time, Dugu Xian chanted and dashed towards Yin Batian with his sword. The sword moved, and the shadow of the sword followed. Dugu Xian leaped into the air and spun in the air. A blinding sword aura shot up like a dazzling silver dragon. Li Zixuan could feel the sharpness around Dugu Xian even from afar. He couldn't help but be shocked. Compared to Dugu Feiying, Dugu Xian had improved a lot after that battle. His battle prowess had also increased a lot. This sword strike already had the aura of a grandmaster expert. Being targeted by 2 sharp sword intents at the same time, Yin Beishan's heart skipped a beat. He had no choice but to give up on his plan to kill Dugu Feiying. He could only use his sword to block the attack. His long red hair fluttered in the air, and his eyes were cold. His sword was like a rainbow, and his footwork changed. First, he used a simple lift of his sword to deflect Li Zixuan's Ride the Wind. Then, he appeared in front of Dugu Xian. He waved his sword lightly, and Dugu Xian was sent flying by a huge force. Blood flowed out of his mouth. He was relaxed and indifferent to the extreme. Yin Batian had crushed Li Zixuan and Dugu Xian with his superior cultivation level and unparalleled movement technique. Before Li Zixuan and Dugu Xian's swords converged, he attacked them separately. First, he pushed back Li Zixuan and then injured Dugu Xian. Furthermore, he looked relaxed as if it was as easy as blowing away dust. It was obvious that there was a huge gap between their strength. Swish, swish, swish. How could Dugu Feiying be missing at this time? Although he regretted falling for Li Zixuan's trick, he couldn't abandon his brother and leave alone. The only choice left for him was to fight to the death. While Yin Batian was busy fighting Li Zixuan and Dugu Xian, he channeled his qi into his palm and infused it into the flying daggers that had accompanied him day and night. He could even feel the resonance of blood being thicker than water, as if the flying daggers were a part of his body. Then, he stared intently at Yin Beishan's body. When Yin Batian retreated, Dugu Feiying made his move decisively. 3 Xian Leaf flying daggers flew towards Yin Beishan's path in a triangular formation, emitting a blazing light. Dugu Feiying felt that these 3 flying daggers were the most exciting, most accurate, and most powerful flying daggers he had ever used in his life. Of course, these 3 flying daggers were also the most powerful enemies he had ever faced in his life. This was the sound of a flying dagger piercing into flesh. Yin Batian was a martial arts expert at the peak of the Grandmaster realm. His 5 senses were extremely sharp. Of course, he could feel the hot knife qi behind him. However, his entire body was already in a position to retreat. Even if he forcefully changed his direction midway, he would not be able to completely dodge Dugu Feiying's 3 carefully calculated flying knives. One of the mystic leaf flying daggers sliced open a wound on Yin Beishan's left arm like tofu. If it weren't for his strong inner qi and quick reflexes that allowed him to focus his true qi on the wound at the critical moment, this flying dagger would have sunk into his arm. The battlefield fell into an eerie silence. No one would have thought that the weakest of the 3, Dugu Feiying, would be able to injure Yin Batian, a peak grandmaster. Dugu Feiying's 3 flying daggers were perfectly executed because Li Zixuan and Dugu Xian had created a very good opportunity for him to attack. However, to be able to grasp the opportunity so well was enough to prove that Dugu Feiying's current ability was much, much better than before. This brat has suddenly exploded with power. He's now famous for injuring a peak grandmaster when he's at the qi cultivating stage. Li Zixuan smiled as he looked at Dugu Feiying, who was still in a daze. You little bastard. I'm going to cut you into pieces. Yin Batian pulled out the flying dagger from his arm and threw on the ground. Then, he screamed at Dugu Feiying furiously. Humiliation. He was a master at the peak of the Grandmaster realm, but he was injured by a junior at the middle stage of Qi transformation. If he didn't kill Dugu Feiying today, he would become the laughingstock of the entire Jianghu. F***CK. Don't you call me that, you old bastard. If other people hear you, they'll think that I'm related to you. I'm your grandpa. If you call me that again, I'll stab you again. Dugu Feiying had been calling Een Batian an old bastard. Now, that Een Batian called him a little bastard. He couldn't take it anymore. An old bastard and a little bastard. If other people didn't know their relationship, they would think that they were father and son. That was why Dugu Feiying cursed in exasperation. Li Zishuan, who was preparing the second sword technique of the 9 Taishian swords, couldn't help but laugh when he heard that. He didn't expect Dugu Feiying, this unlucky kid, to be such a prankster. He didn't forget to be funny even in a life and death situation. Because of that, more than half of the sword technique that he was preparing dissipated. Wah wah wah. You little bastard, you're too much. Een Batian had been high and mighty for decades. When had he ever been humiliated like this? It was already a miracle that he didn't vomit blood on the spot. Even so, he still felt a ball of fire rising up his head. He picked up his sword and flew toward where Dugu Feiying was standing without a care. F***CK. Unfilial grandson. How dare you kill your grandpa? I'm going to kill you. Don't. Grandpa. You my grandpa. I'm sorry. F***CK. Big brother. Xiao Xian. I'm going to die if you don't come and save me. How could Dugu Feiying bear the anger of a master at the peak of the supreme power realm? In less than 2 seconds, there were 4 or 5 sword wounds on his body. He hurriedly asked Li Zishuan and Dugu Xian for help. Chapter 506. 9 Taishian Swords, Second Style, Graceful. Li Zishuan wasn't discouraged at all after his first attack was easily deflected by Een Batian. After he steadied himself, he followed up with the second style of 9 Taishian swords. The sword in Li Zishuan's hand moved even faster, its trajectory like a flying dragon soaring in the sky. Carrying the remaining power of the first sword, riding the wind, its trajectory was like a flying dragon soaring in the sky, erratic. On the other side, Dugu Xian's sword became even sharper. He flew up into the sky and started the second wave of attacks with Li Zishuan. Een Batian didn't care at all. He just wanted to kill Dugu Feiying first. He was very, very angry today. He didn't know how many years it had been since he was this angry. F***CK. Old bastard, are you done yet? You're forcing me to do this. I'm going to use my ultimate move. Dugu Feiying staggered 2 steps and waved his hand, indicating for Een Batian to stop first. Then, he said in a serious tone. While he was talking, he was also putting on a posture. It really looked like he was serious. Actually, he knew that he was just an empty shell now. Although only a few breaths of time had passed, the true Qi in his body had been exhausted. There was no doubt that if he did not use up all of his true Qi when Een Batian attacked just now, there was a 10,000% chance that he would be dead by now. At that time, neither Li Zishuan nor Dugu Xian could save him because they couldn't make it in time. He could only rely on himself. That was why even though he looked like he was in a sorry state, it wasn't easy for him to survive. No one in the Qi-forming realm could do better than him. You're asking for it. Dugu Feiying's acting was so good that Een Batian didn't know if it was real or fake. However, Een Batian didn't believe that Dugu Feiying would be able to throw out 3 flying knives that could threaten a master like before. He didn't want to give Dugu Feiying another chance. He wanted to kill Dugu Feiying before Li Zishuan and Dugu Xian's sword arrived. He was confident that he was faster than Li Zishuan and the others. At this moment, Een Batian's mind was clouded by anger. He originally had the absolute advantage. As long as he fought steadily, he had a 90% chance of killing Li Zishuan, Dugu Feiying, and Dugu Xian. But now he had to take the risk of being injured by Li Zishuan and Dugu Xian in order to assassinate Dugu Feiying. It was unbelievable. It had to be said that anger could really blind a person's eyes and make them lose their rationality. However, Bashan's plan wasn't entirely wrong. Under normal circumstances, Li Zishuan and Dugu Xian wouldn't have been able to come to Dugu Feiying's aid before Batian killed him. Of course, that was under normal circumstances. Unfortunately, our main character, Li Zishuan, was not a normal person from beginning to end. Nonsense. Can a normal person be as evil as him? He practiced both martial arts and literature, and he was the most powerful person among his peers. Li Zishuan was 10 feet away from Batian, and Batian was 6 feet away from Dugu Feiying. No matter how he calculated, Li Zishuan would never be able to catch up to Batian. At this moment, Li Zishuan's mind was unusually calm. In an instant, he relied on his immense spiritual energy to come up with at least 100 plans. After analyzing and comparing, he finally came up with the most optimal and most likely plan to save Dugu Feiying. 9 Taishian swords, 3rd style, Snow Walk. Snow Walk without a trace, swift as a swallow. 9 Taishian swords, 4th style, Wave Breaker. Wave Breaker, Sea Lord, Thunder Fury. 9 Taishian swords, 5th style, Dust Parting. A sword parting the dust parting. Li Zishuan used the remaining power of the 2nd style of 9 Taishian swords to consecutively use the 3rd, 4th, and 5th styles in less than a breath's time. He didn't want to kill anyone, but because he changed his moves too quickly, he couldn't hit anyone at all, and all of them hit the air. The reason why he did this was because he wanted to take advantage of the situation. 9 Taishian swords was a supreme sword technique derived from Li Zishuan's internal energy. When he used it, the 9 styles were linked together, and it was like a storm. It was continuous and overwhelming. Moreover, the power of each style would stack with the power of the next style. Correspondingly, the speed of the sword style would also stack. Li Zishuan planned to use this method of stacking sword styles to catch up with Bashan's speed. This was the most feasible plan that he came up with after using his immense spiritual energy to deduce countless times. After the 5th style of 9 Taishian swords was used, the tip of the chasing wind sword shone with a cold light. An extremely cold sword intent instantly locked onto Bashan's body. This sword was really a dust parting. Li Zishuan's speed had already exceeded his limit. Because of this extreme speed, his long hair was pulled back like a steel wire on this windless mountain path. After entering the Grandmaster realm, Li Zishuan's 5 swords were now at least twice as powerful as the 5 swords he used to fight against the devils incarnate in the Chung Mansion. 9 Taishian swords was able to surpass the level of the enemy. That was why he was able to fight Chung Yaojin to a standstill when he was only at the peak of Qi refining stage. Although Chung Yaojin went easy on him, in terms of moves, he wasn't inferior to Chung Yaojin. Now that he was able to use 5 swords in a row as a Grandmaster, judging from the power of the 5th style, Dust Parting, he indeed had the ability to threaten a Grandmaster peak expert. Not enough, still not enough. Li Zishuan did a rough calculation and felt that his current speed was still not enough. Therefore, he continued to change his moves. The 6th style of 9 Taishian swords, Drifting Cloud. Smoke parting, Drifting Cloud, never return. Li Zishuan's speed had already reached the extreme, but now it was 40% faster. At this moment, he and his sword were like smoke and drifting cloud, never to return. Others couldn't even see his real body. This was the first time Li Zishuan used the 6th style of 9 Taishian swords in a real battle. Since he entered the Grandmaster realm after fighting with the Flying Snake last month, he had practiced this sword style at least 100 times at home. Now, he couldn't say that he had mastered it thoroughly, but he had some small achievements. Moreover, with the power of the 5 swords in a row, just now, the 6th style at this moment was like a sword that didn't belong to the human world. Its speed was even faster than Batian. On the other hand, Dugu Xian was not idle. When Li Zishuan used the 4th style of 9 Taishian swords, he had already seen through Li Zishuan's intention. After all, his martial arts talent was one of the best among the younger generation. Moreover, the person who was in danger was his brother. Logically speaking, he should be more anxious than Li Zishuan. After seeing through Li Zishuan's intention, Dugu Xian jumped up and used a series of complicated sword moves. Then, his speed increased by 60%. Although he was not as fast as Li Zishuan, he was not far behind. The two of them, one in front and one behind, stabbed their swords at Yin back. Chapter 507. This is bad. When Yin sword was less than 3 inches away from Dugu Feiying's throat, he suddenly felt two murderous intents coming from behind him. He felt a sense of danger. But at this moment, even if he turned around, he wasn't confident that he could block these two killer moves. However, he had no choice but to turn around. He didn't want to die together with Dugu Feiying. During this moment of hesitation, Li Zishuan's sword got closer to Yin Beishan's heart. Although Yin Beishan's martial arts realm was higher than flying snakes, his ability to make decisions on the spot was not as good as flying snakes. In a moment of desperation, Yin Batian had no choice but to give up on Dugu Feiying. He quickly turned his body and tried to use his sword to parry Li Zishuan's chasing wind sword. The two swords clashed, and a chi sound was heard. Yin Beishan's hasty attack was ultimately unable to defeat Li Zishuan's flowing cloud, the 6 or the 9 Tai Xian swords that he had been accumulating for a long time. The wind-chasing sword easily cut open a wound below Yin Beishan's right rib, and the sword sank into Yin Beishan's body due to inertia. Dugu Xian also took the opportunity to stab his sword into Yin Beishan's left rib. However, Yin Batian had time to block the attack, so Dugu Xian's sword didn't go in too deep. Shameless brat! How dare you sneak attack me? Yin Batian roared and released his true chi at the peak of the Grandmaster realm, sending Li Zishuan and Dugu Xian flying far away with their swords. Dugu Feiying also took the opportunity to crawl to Li Zishuan's side. He had just survived a disaster. At this moment, this guy's heart couldn't help but thump, thump, thump. He thought he was going to die just now because Li Zishuan and Dugu Xian were still far away from him. Now that he found out that he was still alive, he had to cherish this hard-won chance of survival. Dugu Feiying swore in his heart that he would never do this kind of work again, even if he was beaten to death. Damn it! As soon as Yin Batian finished speaking, he flew over with his sword in hand. The 2 wounds on his body were dripping with blood, making him look extremely horrifying. Of course, the expression on his face was even more horrifying. This old man probably hadn't been injured for more than 10 years, and now he was so angry. That's right, Yin Batian was furious. At this time, he threw out all of his sword moves as if they were free. It looked like he wanted to quickly cut down the 3 little trash fish in front of him. At this moment, of course, Li Zishuan would not be so stupid as to fight head-on with a master at the peak of the supreme power realm who was in a berserk state. He stood in the middle of the 3 people, combined with the analysis of his powerful spiritual force, and used the full defense version of the Taiji sword to bear and resolve a large number of attacks for the whole team. Bang! 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 Just when Yin Batian was about to attack again, the sound of hundreds of people running together suddenly came from the mountain path, and the sound was getting closer and closer. Yin Batian took a closer look and saw that it was a team of 100 Imperial Guards. How can they be so fast? Yin Batian was not the only one who thought so. Li Zishuan, Dugu Xian, and Dugu Feiying all had the same thought. Although the 3 of them wanted the Imperial Guards to leave the snake swarm and come to save them, they never thought that the Imperial Guard would come so quickly. In fact, when Yin Batian was hit by Dugu Feiying's flying dagger, the connection between him and the snake swarm immediately weakened by 30%. Later, when Li Zishuan and Dugu Xian suddenly attacked him, Yin Batian suffered even more serious injuries, and he instantly lost all connection with the snake swarm. As a matter of fact, the Imperial Guards closest to them took the opportunity to rush over. Trying to run? It's not that easy. Li Zishuan sensed that Yin Batian was quietly retreating. He laughed coldly and appeared in front of Yin Batian. He was going to take the initiative to attack. Rocks spreading wings, hugging the moon, Yiksha exploring the sea, wild goose shooting, green dragon showing claws, falling flower, white tiger grabbing the tail, black dragon twisting the pillar, sweeping plum blossom. Last time, we fought against the flying snake. Li Zishuan had taken 18 offensive sword moves from the 55 Taiji sword forms and used his powerful mind energy to quickly deduce the best combination of offensive sword moves. He created a full offensive version of the Yang-style Taiji sword and beat the flying snake until it could not breathe. This time, Li Zishuan did not hesitate to use the full attack version of the Taiji sword against Yin Batian. His goal was to stall Yin Batian and prevent him from escaping. Back then, Snake King had personally told Yin Batian in the secret chamber, "If you meet that Li Zishuan kid, if you can kill him in one move, don't save it for the second move. That kid is evil, and he'll be a disaster if you let him live." At this moment, Yin Batian finally understood Snake King's good intentions. Previously, when he wanted to fight Li Zishuan had created a strange set of sword forms that could always nullify his attacks. Now that he did not want to fight anymore and wanted to escape, Li Zishuan had created another set of sword forms that stuck to him like glue. It was really annoying. Dugu Xian and Dugu Feiying were not idiots. They also understood Li Zishuan's intention. One of them held a sword, while the other threw a flying knife from afar. They both joined the battle at the same time. In this short period of time, Dugu Feiying had already recovered 10 to 20% of his inner breath. He could still throw flying knives from afar to harass Yin Batian. Poor Yin Batian, a master at the peak of the Grandmaster realm, was being chased by 3 juniors at a lower level. It was really frustrating. However, there was nothing he could do. He could only defend himself while feeling anxious. The 100 Imperial Guards took advantage of the precious time that Li Zishuan had bought for them to surround Yin Batian. At this point, the situation of a pack of wolves trapping the Lion King was finally formed. The arrogant master at the peak of the Grandmaster realm was now like a hero at the end of his road. He looked at the increasing number of Imperial Guard around him, and his eyes flashed with anger and unwillingness. Seeing this, Li Zishuan quickly retreated from the battle with Dugu Xian. He did not need to personally charge into the battle anymore. The Imperial Guards had a battle formation that was specially designed to deal with the masters of the Jianghu. He only needed to stay outside and hold the line. Yin Batian, you only needed to hand over Snake King, but you insisted on doing things your own way. In the end, you dragged your sect down with you. You're asking for trouble. Since you don't want to hand over Snake King, I have no choice but to wipe out your 7 cultivators of virtue. Li Zishuan calmed his inner breath and said coldly. Now that the situation was settled, he was no longer in a hurry. "Bah, the winner takes all. You can kill me or cut me up as you wish, but do you think it's your turn to teach me a lesson? When I was roaming the Jianghu, you were still in your mother's womb." Chapter 508. You're about to die, yet you still have a sharp tongue. As citizens of the great Tang, the 7 cultivators of virtue disobeyed His Majesty's orders and openly opposed the imperial court's army in broad daylight. This is no different from a rebellion. Soldiers, listen up. Take down this hut. Dugu Xian didn't want to cause any more trouble, so he waved his hand and ordered coldly. At this moment, he was back to being a great general who commanded thousands of soldiers and horses. Yes, the imperial army answered loudly, and hundreds of soldiers formed a MO saber formation with their MO sabers and began to attack Yin Batian. Although the imperial army's martial realm was far inferior to Yin Batian's, their seamless cooperation made up for their lack of individual strength. When Yin Batian beat back an imperial army soldier, dozens of MO sabers would follow behind him. Thus, he didn't dare to go all out and attack anyone. This was the power of a battle formation. Many people scoffed at the use of battle formations, thinking that it was just something made up by novelists and that its use on the battlefield was negligible. Li Zishuan also thought so in the past, but after seeing the imperial army beat up Yin Batian, he didn't think so anymore. In fact, if one didn't have a battle formation, it was no different from being a hooligan. The tactics of ancient armies mainly relied on battle formations. Because communication methods were basically non-existent, sound couldn't travel far, flags couldn't be seen, Fireworks and musical instruments were monotonous, and messengers could be killed if they ran too slowly. A mechanized battle formation was the only way to achieve the goal of a general. For soldiers, they just had to remember who was next to them and whether they should stand in a horizontal line or a diagonal line. As for the rest, it was up to the officers. As for the power of military formations, a simple example could be used to illustrate it. According to reliable historical records, Emperor Wu of Song of the Southern Dynasties led a few hundred soldiers to defeat tens of thousands of peasant soldiers. Many people would think that this was just bragging, but if one understood the true meaning of battle formations, they would know that it wasn't just guns that could be used against the natives. The Art of War recorded the 10 most basic battle formations: square formation, circle formation, sparse formation, number formation, sharp formation, goose formation, hook formation, shin formation, water formation, and fire formation. Some of the messy formations in the later generations were derived from these 10 basic formations. The principle of using formations was to break through the weak points of the opponent's formation and expand the results of the battle after breaking through. Later on, this theory was no longer limited to field battle formations. Eventually, it was promoted to national strategy by Sun Wu. From this, it could be seen that ancient military commanders attached great importance to military formations. In just 15 minutes, Bashan's body was covered in a dozen saber wounds. While there were quite a few injured Imperial Army soldiers, there were even more Imperial Army soldiers coming to reinforce him. What made Batian want to curse the most was that while he was fending off the soldiers, he also had to be on guard against the shameless sneak attacks of Li Zishuan, Dugo Exant, and Dugo Fading. Right now, the three of them were considered experts in Bashan's eyes. They were experts who could threaten his life. The wounds on his body were proof of that. Under the influence of various unfavorable factors, Bashan's true chi was being depleted faster and faster. The saber wounds on his body were increasing, and he had entered a vicious cycle. If this continued, he would be hacked to death in less than 15 minutes because of his true chi. After all, even a martial Dao master could not have an endless supply of true chi. Batian, why don't you just surrender? You're also a formidable person. I don't think you want to end up being hacked to death, right? If you surrender, I can leave you with an intact corpse. Li Zishuan's eyes were like torches. He had already seen through the situation on the battlefield. He crossed his arms and looked at Batian coldly. Yes. Batian, if you call me Grandpa, I might be kind enough to give you a quick death. Don't make any more pointless struggles. Huh? Dugu Feiying laughed as he played with the Xian Leaf flying dagger in his hand. To him, there was no way he would let go of such an opportunity to beat a drowning dog. Moreover, this was a peak Grandmaster. He would be proud to brag about such a drowning dog in front of others. But he had forgotten who was the one who shamelessly called him Grandpa and begged for mercy during the battle. Pfft, shameless brat, if I have the chance, I will definitely kill you. New and old grudges surged in his heart. Looking back at the battle just now, Batian realized that he had lost because of Dugu Feiying's foul mouth. That was why he had made several wrong decisions. Therefore, the person Batian hated the most was not Li Zishuan or Dugu Exant. It was definitely Dugu Feiying. He wanted to eat his flesh and drink his blood. Ha ha! Come at me. Come at me if you dare. Unfortunately, you can't hit me. Let me ask you, are you angry? Are you angry? Ha ha! Dugu Feiying continued to use his foul mouth. But this time, his foul mouth was going to cause trouble again. Sha sha sha. Suddenly, a very clear sha, sha, sha sound came from above the mountain path. Li Zishuan and the others looked up in confusion and were shocked. It was a giant python with 7 heads. When it stood up, it was as tall as 4 people. Li Zishuan cursed in his heart. At this moment, he wondered if the world he had transmigrated to was the real world of Tang Dynasty. Why does it feel like a magical world? Even a giant python with 7 heads has appeared. What the hell is going on? Following behind the huge snake was a man with a thin face and snow-white hair. The man snorted and said, "Don't worry. Oomph. Do you really think that the 7 cultivators of true virtue is a pushover? Flying snake? Li Zixuan's pupils shrank as he suddenly spoke. He recognized the person in front of him at first glance. Although the flying snake was masked when he tried to assassinate him, Li Zixuan still remembered the pair of eyes. Therefore, even though the flying snake had a withered face and snow-white hair, Li Zixuan still recognized him. Although the flying snake didn't have much true qi fluctuations on his body, he looked even more sinister and terrifying when he stood next to the giant 7-headed snake. Hee, Mr. Li, you really have good eyesight. You can actually recognize me. The flying snake put his hands behind his back and sneered. Junior Marshal Brother, your hair. The Imperial Army was also frightened by the giant 7-headed snake and stopped attacking. Embark looked at the withered face and snow-white hair of the flying snake and couldn't help but exclaim in shock. It's fine. Senior Marshal Brother, you should heal your wounds first. Next, let these people see the real 7 cultivators of true virtue. Ha ha! The flying snake waved his hand and laughed maniacally. Chapter 509. The real 7 cultivators of true virtue. On the mountain path, Li Zixuan murmured. Then, a trace of horror flashed through his eyes. He looked at the flying snake and asked in confusion, "Is this the 7 cultivators of true virtue?" When Qin Xiong and Cheng Yaojin came to the Li residence, they told Li Zixuan that there was a rare poisonous snake called the 7 cultivators of true virtue in the Miaojiang region. It had 7 heads and was extremely poisonous. Regardless of whether it was a human or an animal, as long as one of its heads bit someone, they would immediately die. At that time, Qin Xiong guessed that the so-called blood rain of true virtue was related to the 7 cultivators of true virtue. Now that he saw such a huge 7-headed snake and the 7 cultivators of true virtue on the mountain, how could Li Zixuan not know that this huge snake was the 7 cultivators of true virtue that Qin Xiong mentioned? However, he would never have thought that the 7 cultivators of true virtue not only had many heads, but its body was also so huge. It was simply impossible for a human to fight against it. Huh, you have good eyesight. This is the guardian beast of our 7 cultivators of true virtue. What do you think? Isn't it very awe-inspiring? Hee. Unfortunately, you will all become food in its stomach today. Ha ha ha. The flying snake looked at Li Zixuan and the others with a trace of ridicule in its eyes. It was like a cat playing with a mouse. It opened its arms and laughed arrogantly. In stark contrast, the Imperial Army that had been besieged by the snakes had gradually rushed over. When they saw the huge and ferocious serpent of 7 cultivators, although they might have felt fear in their hearts, they did not scatter in all directions. They only clenched the modeo in their hands and quietly stood behind Dugalexin, waiting for their commander's orders. At this time, the military discipline of the Northern Yamen Imperial Army was reflected. If it were any other army, they would have already fled in all directions after seeing such a terrifying monster. It was really rare for the Imperial Army to be able to overcome the fear in their hearts and not forget military discipline at such a critical time. Don't flatter yourself. If this 7 cultivators of true virtue was really the guardian beast of your 7 cultivators of true virtue, why didn't you bring it out earlier? You are merely at the middle stage of the Grandmaster realm. It is impossible for you to fully control the giant snake of 7th cultivator of true virtue. Now that you're able to bring this snake out, I'm afraid you have to pay a heavy price, right? Li Zixuan frowned and sneered at the flying serpent. Li Zixuan reckoned that in the current world, only his master, spiritual master Spirit Su, would be able to match such a huge 7-virtue serpent. Moreover, the most powerful expert of the 7 cultivators of true virtue, Embark, was only at the peak of the Grandmaster realm. Therefore, he didn't believe that the flying serpent would be able to subdue such a ferocious beast. If they had the ability to subdue this snake, the 7 cultivators of true virtue would have become famous in the Wulin world a long time ago. Perhaps they would have even become a giant in Jianghu instead of being a nobody like they were now. Therefore, there must be some unknown story behind this. Moreover, the current flying snake's aura was many times weaker than before. Its hair had turned white, and its face was haggard. It was obvious that it had experienced a great change. Sure enough, as soon as the flying serpent heard this, its complexion changed greatly. It glanced coldly at Li Zishuan and said in a sharp voice, "Little bastard, if you hadn't gone too far, how would this old man have invited 7 cultivators of true virtue out? Now that things have come to this, you have to pay the price in blood. Don't even think about leaving." After saying that, he raised his head and shouted, "Poison, poison, kill them all. Don't leave a single one alive. Today, they will all be your food." Roar. 7 cultivators of true virtue seemed to understand human language. It looked up to the sky and roared excitedly. Its roar resounded through the valley and spread outside at a very fast speed. Everyone in the field felt as if they were facing a ferocious beast. Their eardrums were buzzing due to the roar, and the weaker soldiers were already vomiting blood. After 7 cultivators of true virtue finished roaring, its body wriggled forward. In the blink of an eye, it arrived near the several hundred Imperial guards that had besieged Enbatian. Its 3 heads stretched out and opened its bloody mouth at the Imperial guards. "Evil creature, how dare you?" Seeing that the dozens of Imperial guards were about to fall into the snake's stomach, Li Zishuan, Dugu Hexen, and Dugu Fing used their best moves and attacked the 3 heads of the 7 cultivators of true virtue. Ding, ding, ding. There is no sound of sharp blades piercing into flesh, but the sound of metal colliding could be heard. The heads of the 7 cultivators of true virtue were as hard as metal. "Retreat. Everyone retreat immediately. Retreat. Everyone retreat immediately." First, Li Zishuan shouted at the Imperial guards. Then, Dugu Xian's roar could be heard as well. They all understood that if they didn't retreat, all 4,000 of them would die here. Such a huge beast wasn't something that could be resisted by humans. Although the previous attacks of Li Zishuan, Dugu Hexen, and Dugu Fing didn't break through the 7 cultivators of true virtue's defense, they did slightly hinder its attack. When the several hundred Imperial guards heard the order to retreat, they took the opportunity to run out of the 7 cultivators of true virtue's attack range. "Feiying, you and Xiao Xin leave first. I'll cover the rear." Dugu Xan, who had just been sent flying after his attack failed, hurriedly roared at the 2 people beside him. "Big brother, I'm not leaving." Dugu Feng said angrily, "F***CK. You're F***King Bulsh**T. Li Zishuan, will never sacrifice my brothers in exchange for my own survival. Besides, my martial arts are better than yours. It's not your turn to cover the rear." Li Zishuan jumped up from the ground and shouted. Then, he turned to Dugu Feiying and said, "Feiying, among the 3 of us, you're the one who consumed the most energy and suffered the most injuries. Take the army and retreat first." Dugu Xian looked at Li Zishuan with a complicated expression. Then he said, "That's right. Feiying, take the Imperial guards and leave quickly. But don't be so King wishy-washy. At this time, no one will be able to leave." Dugu Feiying wanted to refute, but he was interrupted by Li Zishuan's shout. When Dugu Feiying heard this, he gritted his teeth and no longer hesitated. He jumped on his horse and shouted as he ran, "Retreat! Everyone retreat!" The Imperial guards, who were further away from the battlefield, were silent for a moment. Then they followed Dugu Feiying and ran down the mountain. In such a short time, the 7 cultivators of true virtue's tail had already swept away a large group of soldiers. When it saw that the army was about to retreat, it hissed and was about to snake its body to chase after its food. "Oomph! Evil creature, your opponent is us." Dugu Xen and Li Zishuan led the remaining 100 or so Imperial Guards and began to attack the 7 cultivators of true virtue's body in an attempt to stop the beast from harming the army. Chapter 510. Roar, roar, roar. Seeing that a group of ants actually dared to block its path, 7th cultivator of true virtue swept its huge tail horizontally. More than 30 Imperial Guards couldn't dodge in time and were sent flying backward while vomiting blood. Li Zishuan and Dugu Xian barely dodged the attack by relying on their realms and agility techniques. Facing 7th cultivator of true virtue, they only had the strength to protect themselves. Therefore, while stabilizing their bodies, Li Zishuan shouted to the Imperial Guards around him, "You guys retreat first. General Dugu and I can hold on for a while." At present, Yin Batian was seriously injured, and the flying snake seemed to have encountered an inexplicable accident. It probably had less than 10% of its strength left. Therefore, 7th cultivator of true virtue was undoubtedly 7th cultivator of true virtue. Zhao Siwei, take the brothers and retreat first. Li Xianan, and I will catch up later. Upon hearing Li Zishuan's words, Dugu Ixin furrowed his brows. He had led soldiers for so many years, but he had never encountered a commander who would cut off the path of retreat for his subordinates. He couldn't help but feel a little strange. However, in the current situation, the Imperial Guards were indeed of no use. Thinking of this, he took advantage of the moment when 7th cultivator of true virtue turned around and turned his head to speak to a young general. "General, we won't leave. As the general's personal guards, how can we abandon the general and leave alone? General and Lord Zhu leave first, and we will cover the rear." Zhao Siwei said to Dugu Ixin while holding the Modeo and guarding against 7th cultivator of true virtue's movements. Leave? Don't even think about leaving. Poison, poison, kill them quickly. Kill them as well as the group that just escaped. How can a mere ant block your path? Kill them all. At this time, the white-haired flying snake behind them roared with a crazed expression. Roar, roar, roar. 7th cultivator of true virtue seemed to be able to understand the human language. Its huge tail twisted at an extremely fast speed, bringing about gusts of wind. The fallen leaves in the forest were swept up and fluttered in all directions. At the same time, its 7 heads opened their mouths and flicked their tongues, reaching toward the crowd. Roar, roar, roar. Retreat, retreat. How could petite humans possibly contend against such a huge, vicious beast? Facing the enraged great serpent of 7th cultivator of true virtue, everyone had no choice but to retreat. The soldiers that were too slow were either swept away by the tail of the serpent or unfortunately fell into the belly of the serpent. Most of them were poisoned to death by the poisonous fog that the serpent spat out. The enraged 7th cultivator of true virtue immediately caused the Imperial Guards to suffer heavy losses. Li Zishuan was also shocked. He hadn't expected that 7th cultivator of true virtue would be so terrifying when he was angry. Roar, roar, roar. 7th cultivator of true virtue didn't give up and continued to chase after them. Relying on the advantage of its size, it rampaged all the way, trying to crush the group of ants that were blocking its path. This small group of Imperial Guards was about to be wiped out in an instant. Brothers, set up the MO sword formation. Cover Lord Zhu and the general's retreat. Zhao Siwei got up from the ground, wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and roared at the Imperial Army soldier beside him. Yes, cover Lord Zhu and the general's retreat. The remaining Imperial Guards immediately responded loudly. Although their numbers were small and they were in a bad state, their voices weren't soft at all. Instead, they were full of determination. Zhao Siwei, how dare you disobey the general's orders? Dugu Xian barely managed to stabilize his body under the stormy attacks of 7th cultivator of true virtue. Then, he noticed that the army formation had already taken shape and roared at Zhao Siwei. General, protecting you is the most important responsibility of us 120 brothers. Even if we die, we will protect the general thoroughly. If the general wants to punish us, we won't complain. But please don't disappoint our brothers. General, leave quickly. Zhao Siwei turned his head and roared at Duguxian when he saw that the embryonic form of the Mo sword formation had already taken shape. His eyes were red, and his armor was in a mess. However, his posture was still tall and straight. Standing on a mountain path filled with flying leaves, he looked like a hero at the end of his road. General, leave quickly. There were less than 70 Imperial guards left, and they let out a thunderous roar. As soon as their voices fell, the Mo sword formation that they had formed began to fearlessly charge towards 7th cultivator of true virtue. Zhao Siwei, how could the Mo sword formation formed by only 70 people pose a threat to the berserk 7th cultivator of true virtue? Therefore, Duguxian couldn't help but be enraged when he saw this. He roared and raised his sword to chase after them. Wait! At this time, Li Zishuan stopped Duguxian. Duguxian angrily turned his head and said, Li Zishuan, what do you mean? Why won't you let me go? While he was talking, 7th cultivator of true virtue and the Mo sword formation had already clashed. There is no doubt that the first row of Mo sword soldiers was mercilessly swept away. However, the second row of Mo sword soldiers still rushed forward without fear of death. At this time, they no longer hoped to kill 7th cultivator of true virtue. They only hoped to delay him for a while. It would be even better if they could cut off one of his scales. Pop! Li Zishuan's eyes were red, and 2 drops of tears appeared at the corners of his eyes. He ruthlessly slapped Duguxian's face and said in a hoarse voice, Duguxian, look carefully for me. Who are they fighting for? Who are they injured for? The strength of 7th cultivator of true virtue in its berserk state is far beyond our imagination. If we don't leave now, these brothers will all die in vain. Let's go. In the future, I, Li Zishuan, will definitely avenge my brothers. Li Zishuan really didn't feel good in his heart. If these guards were fewer in number, stronger in skill, and in better condition, perhaps he could fight Duguxian to the death to buy them some time to escape. However, the current situation was that even if the 2 of them tried their best, they would be thankful if 5 of these guards could escape. This was because their current condition was really bad, and each of them was injured. At this critical moment, Li Zishuan chose to be rational. He couldn't be irrational. If he wasn't rational, these cute soldiers would all die in vain, and he and Duguxian would definitely be in danger. The 2 of them didn't have the strength to fight against such a berserk 7th cultivator of true virtue. Let's go. What are you waiting for? Let's go. Seeing Duguxian's sluggish face and unfocused eyes, Li Zishuan roared and dragged him down the snake spirit mountain. Poison, poison. Quickly get rid of these ants in front of us and chase after them to kill them. When the flying snake saw Li Zishuan escaping with Duguxian, it couldn't help but become anxious and hurriedly shouted. If it weren't for the fact that it had lost all its strength, it would have chased after them long ago. Roar, roar, roar. 7th cultivator of true virtue roared 3 times and launched an even more ferocious charge at the Imperial Guards. Chapter 511. Roar, 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 roar. Not only did 7th cultivator of true virtue's roar reverberate throughout Snake Spirit Mountain, but it also traveled further into the distance. Oh, what's that sound? A farmer who was chopping firewood at the edge of Qinling Mountains asked his companion in shock when he heard the faint roar. It sounds like a beast, but I don't think any beast would make such a sound, right? Another middle-aged farmer looked in the direction of the sound and said hesitantly, could it be that there are beasts in Qinling Mountains that we don't know about? Oh, a big tiger, let's go home. No more chopping, no more chopping. The farmer who spoke earlier shuddered and said hurriedly, hey, don't. What's there to be afraid of? The 2 farmers weren't the only ones who heard 7th cultivator of true virtue's roar. On the official road outside Qinling Mountains, pedestrians with sensitive ears could vaguely hear the beast-like roar coming from inside Qinling Mountains. Some of the more timid people rushed into Chang and city. News of unknown beasts in Qinling Mountains spread like wildfire. Reporting, "Come in." Lier, who was in Ganlu Palace, couldn't help but frown when he heard a soldier asking for an audience. "Your Majesty, I heard many people at the city gates saying that there are beasts roaring in Qinling Mountains. I thought that Sir Li and General Dugu are still in Qinling Mountains with their army, so I'm here to report to your Majesty." The person who came was Dugu Feiying's colleague, one of Zhuo soldiers. After Dugu Feiying went to Snake Spirit Mountain with Li Zishuan, he temporarily took over that guy's position and guarded the city gate. "There are beasts in Qinling Mountains?" Li Er's expression changed when he heard that. He stood up and asked Zhao Song, "Zhao Song, how's Dugu Xian and the rest? Have they started attacking the mountain?" Zhao Song quickly went forward and cupped his fists. "Your Majesty, according to the latest report from General Dugu, the 2 doctors from the Imperial Physician Department that Dugu Feiying brought with him yesterday have already concocted the antidote to the poison in Snake Spirit Mountain this morning. They should have started attacking the mountain in the afternoon." "What? Looks like there's a change in the Snake Spirit Mountain." Lier's face became gloomy. He frowned and sat back on the dragon throne, worriedly saying, "At the foot of Snake Spirit Mountain, the atmosphere was extremely solemn. Dugu Xian, who had always been cold and aloof, now looked even colder than before. It was as cold as ice. Dr. Wang, Dr. Qin, please bring some people to help treat the poisoned and injured soldiers." Dugu Xian frowned and said in a deep voice as he looked at the wounded in the camp, "Don't worry, General. We know. We will do our best to treat him." The 2 doctors from the Imperial Physician Department hurriedly cupped their hands and said. Dugu Xian nodded. Seeing that Wang and Qin had gone to the side, he said to Dugu Feiying, "Do an inventory of the army and count the casualties." When he mentioned the word casualties, everyone could hear the slight tremble in his voice. "Yes, big brother." When he saw that only Li Zishuan and Dugu Xian had returned, Dugu Feiying had already guessed that something big must have happened on the mountain. When he heard his elder brother's orders, his heart ached. He opened his mouth, wanting to persuade his elder brother. However, after hesitating for a long time, he did not say anything and walked away. Bam! After Dugu Feiying left, Dugu Xian sat down on the grass behind him. Li Zishuan also sat down. Ever since they left the mountain, Li Zishuan had not said a word. The sorrow and anger in his heart were definitely no less than Dugu Xian's. As a result, there was a strange scene outside the camp. The 2 men sat on the grass without saying a word, as if they were a couple who had just finished arguing. If it wasn't for the heavy atmosphere in the camp, Dugu Feiying would have laughed out loud. After a while, Dugu Feiying walked back and said in a deep voice, "Big brother, 651 Imperial Guards were injured this time." "Your Majesty, 651 Imperial Guards were injured and 215 dead on this trip to Snake Spirit Mountain. This general was unable to complete the mission. Please punish me, Your Majesty." After reorganizing the troops at the foot of Snake Spirit Mountain, Dugu Xian ordered the army to retreat 3 miles. He also ordered the army to send scouts 24 hours a day to see if anyone had escaped from Snake Spirit Mountain. After that, Dugu Xian and Li Zishuan rode out of Qinling, entered Chang, and entered the palace. When they saw Li Er, Dugu Xian quickly got down on one knee and cupped his fists. "It's just a small sect. Why would there be so many casualties? Could it be that something has happened?" Li Er frowned deeply and said, "The Northern Yamen Imperial Guards were one of the most elite forces under Li Er's command. Even if only 3 or 5 of them died, let alone 100, Li Er would feel heartache." Thus, when he heard about such a tragic result, his first thought was disbelief. "Your Majesty, we had already wiped out the top forces of 7 Cultivators sect, but in the end, they invited a giant 7-headed snake." Dugu Xinhuai once again recounted the events of the great battle in the mountains. After listening to it, Li Er was silent. After about a quarter of an hour, he coldly said. A small sect of Jianghu. First, they assassinated an official of the imperial court. Now, they openly resisted arrest and even dared to kill my army. They must have eaten a bear's heart and a leopard's guts. A mantis trying to stop a chariot is like a mayfly trying to shake a tree. I must destroy this 7 cultivators sect. Your Majesty, the most important thing right now is to send reinforcements at the foot of Snake Spirit Mountain to ensure that the giant serpent won't come down and affect the lives of the people outside Qinling Mountain. Otherwise, the consequences will be unimaginable. Dugu Exen lowered his head and continued. That makes sense. Lier nodded and said, Summon Qin Xiong, Cheng Yao Jin, Yu Qigong, Niu Jinda, Li Jing, Zhang Sun Wuji, and Fong Xianling immediately. Yes, Your Majesty. What? There's a giant serpent on Snake Spirit Mountain, and it caused heavy losses to the Northern Yamen Imperial Army? After half an hour, all the important officials gathered by Li Er arrived at the Suite du Palace. After they were all seated, Li Er asked the Guexayan to repeat what he said earlier. After hearing it, Cheng Yaojin's eyes widened in disbelief. Little Xian, could it be the legendary serpent of 7 cultivators? Qin Xiong raised his eyebrows and asked. The others were also shocked. The Tang Empire's military strength was extremely strong. Everyone knew that a mere sect of Jianghu was no match for Li Zishuan. Who would have thought that the result would be like this? Uncle Qin, it's indeed the serpent of 7 cultivators. Li Zishuan cupped his hands and said, Bah! Who cares if it's the serpent of 7 cultivators or the serpent of 8 cultivators? The 7 cultivators sect dared to resist the imperial court's army and even released such a ferocious creature. Your Majesty, this old official request to go to war and avenge our dead brothers. Cheng Yaojin took a step forward and cupped his fists at Lier. Chapter 512. Your Majesty, this old subject also requests to fight. The 7 cultivators of true virtue is in Great Tang's territory, but they didn't abide by the laws of Great Tang. They assassinated the court officials and ambushed the army. If such arrogant people aren't severely punished, the imperial court will lose face. Your Majesty, if you give me 5,000 troops, this subject will definitely take down the 7 cultivators of true virtue in one fell swoop. In the first year of Zhengguan, Great Tang was peaceful. There were basically no large-scale wars. Therefore, these old generals had long been bored to death. Now that they heard that there was a force in Great Tang that dared to jump out and fight against the imperial court, they were both angry and excited. As soldiers of Great Tang, they were very proud. Now that the elite Northern Yamen Imperial Army had suffered heavy losses because of a small sect, they naturally had reason to be angry. However, anger was anger, and the thought of fighting a war made them excited. The soldiers of Great Tang were never afraid of war. They were only afraid of not having a war to fight. Therefore, after hearing Cheng Yaojin request to fight, how could Yuqi Jingda sit still? He quickly jumped out and said loudly, Old Black, you still need 5,000 troops? How could Cheng Yaojin be willing to let Yuqi Jingda steal the limelight? He quickly jumped out and retorted, As long as Your Majesty is willing to give me 3,000 elites, I'll definitely be able to destroy the 7 cultivators of true virtue in 3 days. If not, I'm willing to offer my head to you. In Cheng Yaojin's view, the other party was just a group of people from Jianghu. He had met many of them in his early years, so he felt that those free and undisciplined Jianghu people couldn't be compared to the disciplined and well-trained imperial court army. He said 3,000 troops just now because he was giving face to 7th cultivator of true virtue. Otherwise, 2,000 would be enough. However, it was clear that this old man didn't have the slightest idea of the situation. If the 7 cultivators of true virtue sect was so easy to take down, Li Zishuan and Du Guixin wouldn't have returned in defeat with the 4,000 Northern Imperial Army soldiers under their command. You, lunatic Cheng, Are you really trying to go against me? Yuchi Jingda glared at him and cursed. Seeing that these two old fellows were about to fight again, Qin Xiong quickly grabbed Cheng Yaojin and said, Jijia, don't mess around in front of His Majesty. This Snake Spirit Mountain is not as simple as you think. Lord Li Jing also stepped forward and said, what Xu Bao said makes sense. If the 7 cultivators of true virtue sect was really so easy to deal with little Xian and Dugu Xian's ability, they wouldn't have caused the Northern Yaman's imperial army to suffer such heavy losses. Therefore, the most important thing right now is to figure out how powerful the 7 cultivators of true virtue Great Serpent that little Xian and Dugu Xian encountered was. Only then can we make the appropriate deployment. This was one of the reasons why Li Jing was the war god of the Great Tang, while Cheng Yaojin and Yuchi Jingda were not. Every time they encountered a war, Li Jing was the calmest. He could always see the most crucial problem. Li Er nodded his head and praised. Medicine Master is worthy of being called a Medicine Master. Today, I called all of you here so that you can think of a way to thoroughly kill that 7th cultivator of true virtue on the Serpent Spirit Mountain. Otherwise, if such ferocious beasts were to spread among the people would definitely be plunged into misery and suffering. Duguixin, why don't you tell the other ministers about the size, speed, and lethality of the 7th cultivator of true virtue? This subject obeys your majesty. Dugu Xian cupped his fists and replied in a loud and clear voice. Then he turned around and continued to speak to everyone. Minister Fong, generals, the overall strength of that 7th cultivator of true virtue is above that of a great grandmaster. In terms of strength alone, it is much stronger than a great grandmaster. Therefore, it is very difficult to defeat it with brute force. Moreover, its body is covered with a layer of hard scales. It is very difficult for ordinary swords to break its defense. 7th cultivator of true virtue has 7 heads, and each of them can be used to attack. Its fangs are highly poisonous, and its mouth can spray poisonous fog. Anyone who touches it will die. However, in terms of speed, 7th cultivator of true virtue is inferior to that of a great grandmaster. At best, it can only be compared to a peak great grandmaster. In addition, the strength of its tail is also very great. If an ordinary person is hit by its tail, even if they don't die, they will be seriously injured. Silence. After Duguixan finished speaking, the sweet dew hall fell into silence for a while. Everyone was shocked by the fighting strength of 7th cultivator of true virtue. Yuchi Jingda and Cheng Yaojin, who had previously boasted that they only needed 5,000 or 3,000 elites to destroy it, no longer dared to say such words at this moment. The 2 old generals were so shocked that they couldn't help but swallow their saliva. Fang Xianling came back to his senses and stepped forward. Your Majesty, this old subject believes that the most important thing right now is to send an army to seal off Snake Spirit Mountain. Otherwise, the people around Qinling Mountain will suffer a calamity. At that time, the people of Chang will also panic and not be able to work. Therefore, this old subject earnestly requests your Majesty to make a decision as soon as possible. Zhang Sun Wuji also stepped forward and cupped his hands. This old subject agrees. Such an important matter shouldn't be delayed. We can't let a mere Jianghu sect affect the stability of the people. Li Er nodded and said, Xianling and Xuanling's words are reasonable. Medicine Master, in your opinion, how should we deal with this 7th cultivator of true virtue? Li Jing frowned. He stepped forward and thought for a long time before replying. Your Majesty, this old subject heard that the terrain of Snake Spirit Mountain is steep and the mountain path is narrow. Many places can only allow 1 person to pass through. Even if we send 10,000 troops, I estimate that we can only display the strength of 1,000 people on Snake Spirit Mountain. Such a terrain is extremely unfavorable for an army to fight. Presumably, the reason why the Northern Yaman's imperial army was defeated this time is related to this unfavorable terrain. Therefore, this old subject believes that if we want to kill seventh cultivator of true virtue with the least casualties, we must send an army with heavy crossbows to surround Snake's spirit mountain and lead it to the foot of the mountain. Then, we can use the heavy crossbows to destroy it in one fell swoop. Lier nodded and said with a smile, "Well, Medicine Master's method is quite reliable. What do you think?" The rest of the people in the hall couldn't help but nod in agreement. Only Qin Xiong frowned and pondered. After a while, he asked Li Jing, "Medicine Master's method is reliable, but what should we do to lead seventh cultivator of true virtue to the foot of the mountain?" When Fang Xianling and the others heard this, they couldn't help but cast a puzzled look at Li Jing. Li Jing shook his head and said, "Shu Bao, we could discuss this problem later. Just now, Prime Minister Fang also said that the most important thing now is to send an army to surround Snake's spirit mountain and prevent seventh cultivator of true virtue from going down the mountain to harm the people. We will first surround Snake's spirit mountain and not attack it. If seventh cultivator of true virtue comes down the mountain, we can use the heavy crossbows to kill it. If it doesn't come down the mountain, we will think of another way. In any case, we must send an army to Snake's spirit mountain." What a good idea. After Li Jing finished speaking, Qin Xiong stepped forward and cupped his hands to Lier. "Medicine Master has thought it through thoroughly. This old subject has no objections. Your Majesty, please send troops as soon as possible." The rest of the people also cupped their hands and said, "This subject agrees. Your Majesty, please send troops as soon as possible." Chapter 513. Ganlu Palace. Lier looked at all the officials in the hall and nodded slightly. He was about to issue an edict to dispatch troops when he suddenly glanced at Li Zixuan, who was standing behind with his head bowed and not saying a word. Doubt arose in his heart, and he deliberately stopped the words that had already reached his mouth. "Li Zixuan, what do you think of Medicine Master's plan?" As soon as Lier's voice fell, everyone in the hall suddenly realized that Li Zixuan was too quiet today. Fang Xianling, Zhang Sun Wuji, Cheng Yaojin, and the others had discussed matters with Li Zixuan in the imperial court before. They were well aware of Li Zixuan's character. That was why they felt that Li Zixuan's behavior today was too abnormal. Actually, when Li Zixuan entered the Ganlu Palace today, he had been silently standing in the corner. Other than answering Qin Xiong's question, he didn't say anything else. His heart was filled with anger and sorrow. But most of all, he was deeply remorseful. 215 young lives. How innocent were they? Now, because they helped him take revenge, they didn't even have a corpse. This represented 215 families. Because of him, Li Zixuan, there was going to be a tragedy of people dying before their own. You could say that he was a saint, but every time Li Zixuan thought of this, his heart would bleed. It wasn't that he couldn't bear to see people die, but he couldn't bear to see people die for him. If the heavens could give him another chance to choose again, he would stop this war without hesitation. He would rather think of a way to slowly kill the flying snakes than to implicate innocent people. "Li Zixuan, I'm asking you a question." Lier, who was sitting at the top, saw that Li Zixuan was still indifferent. He couldn't help but raise his voice and call out, "Your Majesty, I'm here." Actually, when Li Zixuan called him for the first time, he had already heard it. The reason why he didn't answer was because he was thinking of a very important matter. At this time, he had no choice but to answer. "I just asked you, what do you think of Medicine Master's plan to kill the snakes? Why aren't you answering?" Lier asked with a frown. Although he wouldn't punish Li Zixuan for such a small matter, he was still a little unhappy. Li Zixuan cupped his hands and said, "Your Majesty, this humble subject thinks that Uncle Li's strategy of surrounding but not attacking is very reliable. I was blaming myself for the 215 soldiers who died. I was lost in thought for a moment, so I didn't hear what Your Majesty said. Please punish me, Your Majesty." Lier suddenly understood. With a complicated expression, he said, "Soldiers are trained for 1,000 days to be used in a single moment. Those 215 Northern Yamen Imperial Guards did not die on the battlefield, but died in the belly of a snake. It was truly a pity." However, seventh cultivator of true virtue is a scourge to the people of Great Tang, and these soldiers have sacrificed their lives to make a contribution to the people of Great Tang. They are all meritorious officials, and I will ask the Ministry of War to draw up a pension plan for them. So Lisa Xuan, you don't have to blame yourself too much. It would have been better if Li Er didn't say anything, but as soon as he did, Lisa Xuan felt as if a knife was twisting in his heart. He took 2 steps forward, knelt on one knee, and saluted. Your Majesty, this time, the attack on Snake Spirit Mountain was mainly because of this humble subject, but this humble subject didn't expect that more than 200 soldiers would die without a trace. How can this humble subject not blame myself? This humble subject mostly agrees with Uncle Li's strategy of surrounding, but not attacking. However, this humble subject has something to add, and I hope your Majesty will approve. Li Er frowned and said solemnly, Speak, your Majesty. This humble subject thinks that we should send the army to surround the mountain with heavy crossbows. If seventh cultivator of true virtue comes down a mountain, we should use the heavy crossbows to drive it back to the mountain and prevent it from harming the people. As for killing the snake, your Majesty, give this humble subject 3 days. This humble subject will definitely make the entire 7 cultivator of true virtue, and that evil beast pay with their blood within 3 days. Inside the main hall, although Lisa Xuan's voice was soft, it was very firm, and everyone could feel the cold, killing intent in his voice. Your Majesty, this humble subject also requests to go to war. This humble subject cannot absolve himself from the blame for this defeat. I hope that your Majesty will give this humble subject a chance to atone for his mistakes. After hearing Lisa Xuan's words, Dugu Xian thought that Lisa Xuan was going to personally lead the army to kill the snake again. Therefore, he quickly cupped his fists and said, Li Er frowned and said, Earlier, Medicine Master said that the terrain of Snake Spirit Mountain is rugged and not suitable for an army to fight. You two have just come down from the mountain, so you should know better. Why do you want to attack the mountain again? In any case, I won't send the army to attack the mountain before all of you come up with a foolproof plan. You can't let your emotions affect your decisions when marching to war. Lisa Xuan shook his head and said, Your Majesty, this humble subject has no intention of leading the army to attack the mountain again. What this humble subject means is that this humble subject alone is enough to deal with the 7 cultivator of true virtue and 7th cultivator of true virtue. What? Li Er's eyes widened, and he suddenly stood up. His hawk-like sharp eyes swept over Lisa Xuan's face as he said word by word, Lisa Xuan, is what you just said true? The officials in the hall were all inexplicably shocked. Qin Xiong's reaction was faster. He hurriedly came over and pulled Lisa Xuan's arm, saying anxiously, Little Xian, this old man knows that you blame yourself, but you can't ignore reality just because you're eager for revenge. Lisa Xuan shook his head and thanked Qin Xiong. Then he looked at Li Er and said solemnly, Your Majesty, what this humble subject said just now is absolutely true. This humble subject only needs the Imperial Army to seal off Snake Spirit Mountain for 3 days. Within 3 days, this humble subject alone can destroy the 7 cultivator of true virtue in one fell swoop. This humble subject's enmity with the 7 cultivator of true virtue is a personal grudge. This humble subject doesn't want innocent people to lose their lives because of this. Your Majesty, please grant my wish. Fang Xinling secretly nodded and thought that this child's nature was really kind. When he saw that Li Er was about to speak, he quickly stepped forward and said, Your Majesty, please wait. This humble subject has something to say. Li Er said, Minister Fang, please speak. Thank you, Your Majesty. Fang Xinling cupped his hands to Lisa Xuan, then turned his head to look at Lisa Xuan and said, This old man is very pleased that Lisa Xuan is brave and fearless and loves his soldiers like his own children. Although this old man doesn't know martial arts, after listening to General Duga's description, I know that the 7 cultivator of true virtue in Snake Spirit Mountain is not something that can be defeated by a single person. As the saying goes, a gentleman doesn't stand under a collapsing wall. Lisa Xuan originally had a heavy responsibility, so don't put yourself in danger because of a momentary impulse. Obviously, Fang Xianling cherished talents and didn't want Lisa Xuan to throw his life away. Lier also nodded and said, Minister Fang's words are reasonable. Lisa Xuan, the enmity between you and the seven cultivator of true virtue isn't a personal grudge. You are a courtier and represent the imperial court. If they dare to assassinate you, it means that they're looking down on the prestige of the country. I won't tolerate them. Therefore, you don't have to take the risk alone. As for the seven cultivator of true virtue, I will deal with them in another way. Lisa Xuan felt helpless. He didn't want to attack the mountain alone. He was an idiot, so of course, he wouldn't foolishly throw his life away. Thank you for your concern, Your Majesty and Minister Fang. However, this humble subject didn't say that out of impulse, nor did I put myself under a collapsing wall. This humble subject is confident that he can destroy the seven cultivator of true virtue by himself. Chapter 514. Southeast of Chang and City, Dunhua Square. A rich and powerful house. Granduncle, Lisa Xuan, and Dugu Xian just returned to the city. In an elegant room deep in the courtyard, a white-clothed man cupped his hands and smiled at the old man. The green-clothed old man sat on his knees on the couch, leisurely brewing tea. His posture was calm and elegant, neither hurried nor slow. After the tea boiled, he poured himself a cup, then leisurely opened his mouth with a smile. Oh, Xianji, judging from your expression, Lisa Xuan and Dugu Xian must have returned in defeat, right? The white-clothed man cupped his hands and said, Granduncle is wise. I heard that the Northern Yamen Imperial Army suffered heavy losses on Snake Spirit Mountain. Lisa Xuan probably came back to ask for reinforcements from the Imperial Court. The blue-clothed old man put the teacup under his nose and sniffed it. Then, he narrowed his eyes with a satisfied expression. Hee, that was expected. Young people nowadays are like newborn calves who are not afraid of tigers. It's good to be impulsive, but if they don't know the immensity of heaven and earth, they will definitely fall down a few times. Xianji, you have to take this as a lesson. Xianji understands. Thank you for your teachings, Granduncle. Hearing the old man's endless preaching, the white-clothed man didn't show any impatience on his face. Instead, he seriously cupped his hands and nodded. After a while, he frowned and asked tentatively, Granduncle, you don't seem to be optimistic about the Northern Yamen Imperial Army besieging the Seven Cultivators sect. Xianji doesn't understand. Is the Seven Cultivators sect really that strong? The blue-clothed old man glanced at the young man with a smile that wasn't a smile and said, They might not be strong. However, how can the things in the world be measured simply by strength? Taking advantage of the situation and borrowing the power of others can defeat the strong. And although the seventh cultivator of true virtue sect is small, it has an extraordinary item. Xianji understands. But what is this extraordinary thing that Granduncle is talking about? The old man waved his hand and smiled. Hee, I won't tell you now, but you'll know in a few days when the seven cultivators of true virtue is destroyed. The young man's expression changed as he asked, Granduncle, didn't you say that you were optimistic about the seven cultivators of true virtue before? Now, why are you claiming that the seven cultivators of true virtue is about to be destroyed? Oh, you. The old man put down the teacup and said with a sigh, His Majesty has always been a man who likes to make grand achievements. This time, the Imperial Army lost face in front of a small seven cultivator of true virtue and returned in defeat. How could His Majesty not be angry? Before sunset, there will definitely be a general leading at least 5,000 elites out of the city. Facing the power of the entire imperial court, the seven cultivators of true virtue is no different from a mantis trying to stop a chariot. Their destruction is only a matter of time. The young man nodded and said regretfully, Unfortunately, we couldn't borrow the hands of the 7 cultivators of true virtue to get rid of Lisa Schwan. I heard that the sect leader of the 7 cultivators of true virtue is a peak Grandmaster realm expert, but I didn't expect that even he couldn't stop Lisa Schwan. It's really annoying. Xianji, Granduncle has told you before that the Jianghu is just a bunch of weeds, not enough to make plans. Granduncle never expected them to be able to get rid of Lisa Schwan in the battle against the 7 cultivators of true virtue. The old man first lectured him earnestly. Then he smiled and said, However, it's not like the 7 cultivators of true virtue didn't completely fail. This time, Lisa Schwan brought 4,000 Northern Yaman's imperial army with him, but he still failed to take down the 7 cultivators of true virtue and even suffered heavy casualties. His Majesty is bound to be dissatisfied with him. Once the Emperor's favor falls, what right does Lisa Schwan have to oppose us? The young man smiled and said, Granduncle is right. It seems that the 7 cultivators of true virtue has helped us a lot. The old man nodded and looked at the young man. That's true, but we can't completely rely on outsiders. Xianji, Granduncle asked you to meet with the other clans to discuss the matter of getting rid of Lisa Schwan. How are the arrangements coming along? The young man smiled, disappeared as he cupped his hands, and said solemnly, Granduncle, don't worry. Everything has been arranged properly. 3 days later, we'll meet at the Grand Hyatt restaurant to discuss the matter. The old man smiled with satisfaction and said, Good, but don't make a fuss. His Majesty has been keeping a close eye on the aristocratic families. Don't let him find out that our clans are secretly communicating. Xianji understands. I'll be very careful. Little Xian, why do you have to put on a brave front? Although the 7 cultivators of true virtue is protected by the 7 cultivators of true virtue serpent, if His Majesty were to send a large number of troops to attack it, he would definitely be able to take it down in one fell swoop. Why do you have to put on a brave front? If something were to happen to you, your father and mother would be there, and I, old Cheng, wouldn't have the face to see them. On the Vermilion Bird Avenue, Cheng Yaojin stood beside Lisa Schwan and nagged at him in disappointment. At this moment, Cheng Yaojin was like an old woman in her 70s or 80s, nagging endlessly. Lisa Schwan didn't mind Cheng Yaojin's nagging because he knew that Cheng Yaojin was truly treating him as his own nephew. He patted Big White's head and turned to Cheng Yaojin seriously. Uncle Cheng, I don't want to implicate the other soldiers because of my personal grievances. We're all born and raised by our parents, and there's no such thing as who should die for whom. The 215 soldiers who died on Snake Spirit Mountain are the biggest mistake I, Lisa Schwan, have ever made in my life, and also the biggest guilt in my heart. I'm afraid I won't be able to repay what I owe them in this lifetime. A person's life is like a plant's autumn, and living in debt will always make one unhappy. I don't want no more debt, so I want to settle the 7 cultivators of true virtue's matter by myself. Cheng Yaojin was stunned in place. At this moment, he thought of those brothers who had sacrificed themselves in the war with him in his early years. Many of them had blocked knives and arrows for him. Therefore, at this moment, his heart was surging with waves and extremely complicated emotions. After a long silence, he patted Lisa Schwan's shoulder and sighed. Good child, don't blame yourself too much. As soldiers of the great Tang, it's indeed their regret that they didn't die on the battlefield, but serving the Emperor's order and repaying his kindness is also the responsibility of a subject and a soldier. His Majesty will also compensate them well. Lisa Schwan shook his head and said, Uncle Cheng, although you say that, I still can't get over the hurdle in my heart. Although I want to destroy the 7 cultivators of true virtue by myself, so that the innocent soldiers won't be implicated, I also want to take revenge for the 215 heroic souls with my own hands. I know Uncle Cheng is worried that something will happen to me, but you don't have to worry. I never do things that I'm not sure about. Cheng Yaojin smiled and said, that's true. But this time, your tone is a bit too big. That's a Jianghu sect guarded by a fierce beast comparable to a great grandmaster. Li Zixuan smiled and said, Uncle Cheng, do you believe me? Cheng Yaojin laughed and said, Haha, Fong Xianling, Yuchi Laohei, and even His Majesty might think that you're bragging, but I believe you. Although you're not willing to tell us the specific methods, how can we, these old fellows, guess your crafty ideas? I'll just stay at home and watch the show. But if you have anything you need help with, don't be embarrassed to say it, because you can't put aside your face. Chapter 515. After bidding farewell to Cheng Yaojin, Li Zixuan rode his horse to the barracks of the Right Guards in the south of the imperial city. After a short discussion in the Sweet Dew Hall, Li Er finally decided to let Niu Jinda lead 6,000 elites of the Right Guards into the Qinling Mountains and join forces with the Northern Imperial Army. They would use 10,000 troops to completely seal off the Snake Spirit Mountain. The reason why Li Er didn't choose Qin Xiong was because he felt that Qin Xiong hadn't fully recovered from his injuries. The reason why he didn't choose Cheng Yaojin and Yuchi Jingda was because he felt that those two old fellows were too impulsive. There was no need to use a sledgehammer to kill a chicken. After the discussion, Dugu Xen didn't have the time to rest and quickly left the city to find his troops at Qinling Mountains. As for Niu Jinda, the general of the Right Wu Wei, he naturally returned to his home to gather his troops and prepare for battle. Little Xian, you're here. After gathering the troops, Niu Jinda came to the commander's tent and greeted Li Zixuan, who had been waiting inside for a long time. Li Zixuan quickly stood up and said, Yes, Uncle Niu, I'll have to trouble you this time. Niu Jinda shook his head and laughed. Huh, what do you mean by hard work? How can this old man disobey His Majesty's orders? Besides, you're half a son-in-law to Shu Bao, so why are you being so polite? Li Zixuan nodded and cupped his hands. Since that's the case, this young man will accept Uncle Niu's kindness. However, this time, this young man has something to tell Uncle Niu. Niu Jinda stretched out his hand and said, Little Xian, tell me. Li Zixuan frowned and said in a deep voice, Uncle Niu, this time, when you lead the army to surround the Snake Spirit Mountain, you must adhere to the strategy of surrounding it and not attacking, because the terrain of the mountain is too steep. Also, the sect leader of the 7 cultivators of virtue, Batian, has already been seriously injured by us, so he shouldn't be a threat. However, the 7 cultivators of virtue's poison techniques are mysterious and unpredictable, and they have the ability to harm people in a large area. Uncle Niu, you must be careful. Yesterday, His Majesty had sent 2 doctors from the Imperial Physician Department. They were both experts with superb medical skills and noble medical ethics. At critical moments, they could save a lot of people in the army. No matter what, I hope that Uncle Niu won't let anyone leave Snake Spirit Mountain in these 3 days. At the same time, I hope that there won't be any casualties in the army during these 3 days. Niu Jinda nodded seriously. He patted Li Zixuan's shoulder and said, Okay, this old man will remember everything you said. This old man also promises you that within these 3 days, not even a single bug will fly out of Snake Spirit Mountain, and the army will not suffer any casualties. As long as those people dare to come down the mountain and fight on the plains, Niu Jinda, won't be afraid of a mere 7 cultivators of true virtue. Li Zixuan cupped his fists and said, Thank you for your trouble. On Snake Spirit Mountain, after the war, the 7 cultivators of true virtue that once stood aloof from worldly affairs and was peaceful and quiet had become somewhat devastated. The mountain path was covered with corpses. The surviving disciples of the 7 cultivators of true virtue were moving the corpses in groups of 2s and 3s. If they didn't bury the corpses on such a hot day, it would easily cause a plague. Obviously, the person who gave the order had some common sense. Of course, these corpses belonged to the disciples of the 7 cultivators of true virtue. After all, most of the dead members of the Northern Yamen army had been eaten by the snakes. Lu Duong, have you finished counting the casualties of our disciples? inside the main hall of the 7 cultivators of true virtue. Batian looked at a disciple of the 7 cultivators of true virtue who just entered the hall and asked with a gloomy expression. Lu Duong bowed cautiously and said, "Sect Master, this disciple has finished counting the casualties. During the war, a total of 38 disciples died, and 26 escaped from the mountain. Now, only 30 disciples are left, and half of them are injured to varying degrees." Batian couldn't help but get angry when he heard that so many disciples had escaped. He slammed the table and cursed. "Humph, a bunch of ungrateful bastards. All these years, this old man has taken care of you, fed you, and even taught you martial arts. Have I ever mistreated any of you? But now that the sect is in trouble, these damned ingrates fled in all directions. They're not worthy of being my sons. I'm so angry." After saying that, he still hadn't vented his anger and threw the teacup in his hand toward the door. Lu Duong jumped in fright and quickly dodged. "Senior brother, please calm down." Upon seeing this, Flying Snake waved his hand toward the rest of the people in the hall, indicating that they should leave. Then, he walked toward Batian and said, "Senior brother, this time, the Imperial Court's army attacked the mountain. Although many of our disciples died, Li Zishuan's side didn't have it easy either. At least 200 of them died. You should know that those were Li Shimin's most elite Northern Yamen army. If it were any other force in Jianghu, it would be impossible for them to achieve such a result. Even if Li Zishuan escaped, he wouldn't be able to avoid being scolded by Li Shimin, right? Moreover, the Imperial Court lost so many people, but they still couldn't take down our 7 cultivators of true virtue, right? After this battle, they definitely won't dare to attack the mountain again. Now, we just need to waste time with them. Let's see who loses their patience first." Batian said, "This is the only thing we can do now. Although the Northern Yamen army has retreated 3 miles, they're still guarding the surrounding passes. Now, we can't leave even if we want to. Fortunately, we have enough food and 7 cultivators of true virtue serpent guarding the mountain. Otherwise, our sect would have been destroyed by that brat." Flying Snake smiled and said, "Yes." Batian grabbed a jug of wine and drank a few mouthfuls. Then, he looked at the Flying Snake and said with concern, "Junior brother, you used your own blood essence to feed the 7 virtue serpent. It can be said that your vitality has been greatly damaged. With your current strength, I don't know how long it will take for you to fully recover. Moreover, we are in troubled times now." Flying Snake was silent. After a while, he opened his mouth and said, "It doesn't matter. This time, the 7 cultivators of true virtue sect was in danger because I was too confident in the terrain and poisonous miasma of Snake Spirit Mountain. I also underestimated the strength of the Imperial Court's army. Of course, I have to bear the responsibility for my mistakes. In that case, if I didn't restore 7 cultivators of true virtue serpent to its peak state, I'm afraid it would have been difficult to turn the tide. As for the future, I believe senior brother won't abandon me." Batian patted his chest and said, "Of course. How could I, Batian, ignore the feelings between fellow disciples? Junior brother, don't worry. Even if you lose your martial arts, senior brother will do his best to protect you." Flying Snake was slightly relieved. He cupped his hands and said, "Thank you, senior brother. Sect leader, sect leader. Bad news, bad news." At this time, a hurried shout came from outside the hall. Judging from the voice, it was Lu Duong, who had just left. "What's the matter? Come in and tell me." Batian frowned and shouted. Lu Duong crawled in, bowed, and cupped his fists. "Sect leader, a lot of the Imperial Court's army has arrived at the foot of the mountain. There are even more of them than the previous batch. Now our Snake Spirit Mountain is surrounded. I don't think even a fly can escape." Chapter 516. This must be an army of over 10,000, right? On top of the Serpent Spirit Mountain, Flying Snake and Batian led the remaining disciples of the 7 cultivators of true virtue to the edge of the cliff and looked down at the army that surrounded them. Even from such a distance, They could see that the ground was full of people. Flying Snake's eyes couldn't help but twitch in shock. At this point, he no longer dared to underestimate the strength of the great Tang army. Previously, he thought that the 7 cultivators of true virtue had the advantage in terms of timing, location, and manpower. If the Imperial Army wanted to capture them, they would have to suffer at least several thousand casualties. But today, Li Zishuan, Dugu Ixin, Dugu Feng, and the Northern Yaman's Imperial Army taught him a lesson. The loss of more than 200 people was a huge number for Li Zishuan. But for Flying Snake and the 7 cultivators of true virtue, it was far from their initial expectations. Moreover, if Flying Snake hadn't abandoned his cultivation at the last moment and brought 7 cultivators of true virtue, who had recovered to his peak state, the 7 cultivators of true virtue might have already been destroyed by the Imperial Army. That Li Shimin is really muddle-headed. He actually mobilized such a large army for the personal grudge between Li Zishuan and you, junior brother. Sigh. Fortunately, they didn't attack us. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to hold on even with the help of 7 cultivators of true virtue. Ian Batian frowned and sighed in a voice that only he and Flying Snake could hear. At this moment, he was somewhat regretting his decision. Senior brother, I'm afraid that we can only hold on until the end of the mountain. Previously, the food reserves of the sect were enough to feed all the disciples for half a year. Now that we've gone through such a big battle, less than half of the disciples are left. The food reserves are enough to last us for more than a year. As long as the Imperial Army doesn't attack us, we'll be safe for another day. Flying Snake turned around and looked at Ian Batian with a worried expression. Ian Batian shook his head helplessly and said, "What else can we do besides holding on until the end of the mountain? The food consumption rate of the army of 10,000 is much faster than that of us, right?" Flying Snake nodded and said, "That's right. But, senior brother, just in case, we have to let the disciples dig some traps on a mountain path tomorrow. Otherwise, if they really attack us, we'll only have 7 cultivators of true virtue left to rely on." What junior brother said makes sense. Husband, hubby, you're back. Li Zishuan couldn't bring himself to feel happy at the thought of how Dugu Xian's guards had desperately covered his retreat on Snake Spirit Mountain. He dragged up by along and returned to his home in Yongless City listlessly. As soon as he entered the house, Han Yushi, who had been lying on the stone table in the front yard waiting for him, hurried over with a joyful expression and grabbed his hand. Li Zishuan's heart warmed. No matter how much wind and rain he had experienced outside, when he returned to this home, he could receive the greatest comfort and support from his wife and other family members. He squeezed the soft hand in his hand and then pulled Han Yushi into his arms. He closed his eyes and said tiredly, "Wife, I'm back." Smelling the fragrance of Han Yushi's hair and feeling her heartbeat, Li Zishuan's chaotic heart instantly calmed down. Home was really the harbor of everyone's soul. Hubby, what's wrong with you? Did something happen to you?" Even if this person was her husband, it was still inappropriate for her to be hugged by someone of the opposite sex in public. Hence, Han Yushi instinctively wanted to break free. However, as the saying went, husband and wife were of the same mind. She quickly sensed her husband's exhaustion and heartbreak. Hence, she gently patted Li Zishuan's back and asked gently, "That's right. Hubby, I implicated so many innocent people and caused them to die tragically today. Do you hate me? Hubby, didn't you go to encircle the 7 cultivators' sect these few days?" Could it be? Han Yushi recalled that Li Zishuan had been at Snake Spirit Mountain recently. She couldn't help but raise her head and exclaim in shock. "My wife's guess is right. The army suffered heavy losses in the battle at Snake Spirit Mountain today. Many of our brothers died while covering for Dugu Xian and me as we retreated. I just returned from the palace." Li Zishuan sighed and let go of Han Yushi. He took her hand and continued walking forward. As he walked, he said, "I'm a defeated general, and I even caused the death of so many brothers. I even hate myself now." Han Yushi frowned, and her face was full of heartache. She raised her head and said, "Hubby, although I'm a married woman, I know that victory and defeat are common in war. Hubby, you mustn't be discouraged because of a moment of disappointment. I believe that there's nothing in this world that can stop you. As for the soldiers who unfortunately died, I will often go to the temple to burn incense and pray for them. If my husband feels guilty, you can take care of their families when you have time in the future. I believe that their souls in heaven will be very happy." When Lisa Schwan heard this, he was suddenly enlightened. He smiled in relief and said, My wife's suggestion is really good. Since things have already happened, there's no benefit in sighing in vain. It's better to do as you said and take some remedial measures. My wife, you're really my great benefactor." Han Yushi said embarrassedly, "How can I be as good as you say? Hubby is just a bystander. Oh, by the way, hubby, you didn't fight well this time. His Majesty didn't blame you, right?" Lisa Schwan shook his head and said softly, "No, he didn't. The situation of the 7 Cultivators sect is special. The result of this battle would be the same no matter who went. His Majesty isn't an unreasonable person. Of course, he won't blame me. However, I lost so many brothers. Even if he doesn't blame me, I'll blame myself. Therefore, I still have to find a way to destroy the 7 Cultivators sect." Han Yushi knew that she couldn't persuade Lisa Schwan to change his mind. She could only force a smile and said, "Hubby, you must be careful. You promised me before that you wouldn't personally take risks." Lisa Schwan pointed to his head and said with a smile, "Of course. Don't worry, my wife. There's not much danger this time. Fighting doesn't only rely on the fist, but also the brain." After saying that, he looked around and asked, Where's father, mother, and Lon? Why don't I see them?" Han Yushi replied with a smile. "Father went to the tea house to play chess. Mother was invited by Duke Lu's wife to watch a play. As for Lon, she went to Cloud Mountain with Iron Egg yesterday. She said that she would help you build an academy and stayed at my father's place last night. I don't think she'll come back for the next 2 days." Lisa Schwan nodded and said with a smile, "Well, it's good that they're all fine. I won't be at home for the next 3 days, so I'll have to trouble you to take care of everything at home. If father and mother ask, just tell them that I went to Uncle Nyo's camp and that there's no danger. Tell them not to worry. Okay." Chapter 517. Hey, did you hear? His Majesty sent 4,000 Imperial Guards out of the city the day before yesterday. It seems that they went to Qinling Mountain to wipe out a Jianghu sect. The next morning, discussions about the Battle of Snake Spirit Mountain resounded in a tea house in the East City. What Jianghu sect? They actually sent 4,000 Imperial Guards to encircle and wipe them out? I think it's called the 7 Cultivators sect. Hey, it's just a small sect. However, not only were the 4,000 Imperial Guards unable to take down such a small sect, they even suffered heavy casualties. A wretched man with broken teeth patted the table and said mysteriously, "What? How is that possible? How can so many Imperial Guards be unable to defeat a small Jianghu sect? Meng Tao, you brat, don't spread rumors." A shirtless man opposite him stood up and pointed at the man with broken teeth angrily. Hey, Boss Mao, I'm not spreading rumors. My cousin is a soldier in the military camp, and he told me this himself. Also, I happened to see the commander of the Imperial Guards returning to the city with injuries yesterday afternoon." The man named Meng Tao stood up and said seriously, "Oh, Commander? Then tell me, who is the commander of the 4,000 Imperial Guards encircling and suppressing the 7 Cultivators sect? I like to see which bastard is the one who lost the face of our great Tang." Meng Tao sat down, took a sip of tea, and said mysteriously, The commander's identity is closely related to the reason why the imperial court encircled and suppressed the 7 Cultivators sect. F***CK. Which bastard is the commander? If you keep me guessing, do you believe that I won't beat you?" Boss Mao waved his big fist and threatened fiercely. Yeah. Tell me who the commander is. Keeping me guessing at such a crucial time. Even if Boss Mount doesn't beat you up, I still want to beat you. Yeah, yeah. Meng Tao's words could be said to have angered the crowd. The customers who had been listening to him earlier started to denounce him one after another. Meng Tao was startled. He quickly put down his teacup and said with an apologetic smile, "Everyone, don't worry. Don't rush. I'll tell you now, I'll tell you now." The commander of the Imperial Guards this time was the commander of the Northern Imperial Guards, General Dugu, and the current Crown Prince, Jean-Shur Lizichuan. As for the reason why the Imperial Court sent the Imperial Army to encircle and annihilate the 7 cultivators of true virtue, it seems that the 7 cultivators of true virtue have a personal grudge against Lizichuan. Lizichuan? Li County man? I say, Meng Tao, you brat, don't King spread rumors, right? Li Xianan was the one who made the curved plows and sold cheap books. He has always been a kind person, so how could he possibly have a grudge with the 7 cultivators of true virtue? Boss Mao widened his eyes in disbelief. Yeah, young man from the Meng family, don't try to slander Li Xianan here. He is our family's benefactor. Yes, yes, yes. You can slander anyone, but you can't slander a man from Li County. Poor farmers like us are all thinking of his kindness. It had to be said that Li Zichuan had a very good reputation among farmers and poor scholars. When they heard Meng Tao say that Li Zichuan was the loser of the army, some people in the surroundings immediately became unhappy and refuted. Meng Tao was very anxious and hurriedly defended himself with a solemn oath. Hey, you guys, I didn't spread rumors, so you have to be reasonable. My cousin got all this inside information, so it's definitely not fake. I'm not lying, so you can ask around if you don't believe me. If I, Meng Tao, am lying, you can come over and cut off my head and use it as a piss pot. Boss Mao was dumbfounded and muttered, could it really be Li Xianan? Could it be that Lord Li really led so many people and lost the battle? I don't believe it. I heard that Lord Li is the youngest Grandmaster of Martial Dao in our Tang Dynasty. He's so powerful that if His Majesty really sent him to attack the 7 cultivators of true virtue, he alone can take down the entire sect. I don't believe that Li Xianan was defeated by them. Yes, yes, yes. Meng Tao, you must be mistaken. Meng Tao refuted, hey, you guys really don't believe me. Yesterday, after Li Xianan and General Dugu returned to Chang and to get reinforcements, another 6,000 elite soldiers left the city under the leadership of General Niu. Now, in order to help Lord Li settle his personal grudge, His Majesty used a total of 10,000 soldiers. TSK. Our Lord Li is really lucky. Everyone could hear the sarcasm in his words. Some people agreed with him, while others disagreed. What good fortune. I don't know what kind of magic potion this Li Xianan gave His Majesty. He obviously doesn't have any ability, but he was put in an important position. He's not even 15 years old, but he's already a 3rd-rank official. He probably got that position by flattery. That's right. How could he use the Imperial Court's army to settle his personal grudge? It's fine if he used them, but they couldn't even take down a small martial sect with so many people. What an embarrassment to the Tang army. Don't listen to Meng Tao's nonsense. There must be a reason why Lord Li was defeated. Otherwise, His Majesty wouldn't have continued to increase the number of soldiers for him instead of blaming him. That makes sense. Hey, T reason. Li Xianan probably sucked up to His Majesty again. Otherwise, he would have been punished by now. T. You're the one who's ting. You're the one who's ting. Your whole family is ting. It was unknown whether it was intentional or not, but the citizens of Chang and city were fighting over this matter, which was supposed to be debated by the big shots in the Imperial Court. Moreover, as the person involved, Li Zichuan, didn't come out to explain himself, those who criticized Li Zichuan and thought that Li Zichuan was selfish and incompetent grew louder and louder. Li Zichuan didn't know about these things at the moment. However, even if he knew, he probably wouldn't have the time to deal with them. After all, he was very busy right now. Falbert, help me prepare some things. When you're done, Send them to Drunken Wind Pavilion for me. Li Zixuan left his house early in the morning and went to the workshop. He scribbled in the study room of Drunken Wind Pavilion for a while before coming out with a piece of paper and giving it to Faubert. Yes, young master. Faubert glanced at the list and saw that everything on it could be bought. He nodded and agreed. Although he was puzzled as to why Li Zixuan wanted these seemingly irrelevant and useless things at this age, his curiosity was no longer that big. Therefore, he didn't ask and went to arrange for people to buy the materials. Song Xiaoxi. Li Zixuan waved his hand, and Song Xiaoxi hurriedly ran over and bowed. Young master, I'm here. Bring 2 honest people with you and follow me to Drunken Wind Pavilion. You guys will guard the door and don't let anyone in. Do you understand? Understood, young master. I will pass on Madame Zhao's message, but you have to be mentally prepared. Snake Spirit Mountain is not an ordinary mountain. The attendant of the yellow door sighed, then turned around and left with his entourage. Are you serious? Was my husband really killed because of Li Zixuan's random command? Today in Chang, and many families were holding funerals. In a dilapidated courtyard in the west of the city, a woman dressed in mourning clothes and another woman in her 30s wearing red silk were squatting in the corner and whispering to each other. How can it be fake? Changda family, think about it. How old is Li Xianan this year? He's not even 15 years old. How can such a young child have the ability to lead troops? Didn't he get this position by flattering the emperor? He did get promoted, but he caused the deaths of so many soldiers. Now in Chang'an City, everyone is talking about it. The middle-aged woman looked around. After confirming that there was no one around, she pulled the young woman aside and whispered, "But Li Xianan doesn't look like such a person." The young woman said in disbelief. The middle-aged woman said earnestly, "Sigh. Changda family, as the saying goes, you may know a person for a long time without understanding his true nature. You haven't interacted with him before. So how do you know what kind of person he is? Now, the families of the soldiers who died in the battle are all crying for justice for their men. There's such a thing, but didn't the imperial court already give us compensation? It's useless for them to cry for justice." The middle-aged woman said resentfully, "Compensation? Changda family, let's not beat around the bush. How much compensation did the imperial court give to your family? Is it 8 strings of coins and 10 mu of Yongya farmland?" "Ah, and Jian, how did you know?" The middle-aged woman snorted and said, "Why can't I know? I just came from Mingpeng's house. All of their families had received this much in compensation. Sheena, I don't want to criticize you, but what can this amount of compensation do? After Chanda left, this family can only rely on you to do some needlework to support the family. But your Baoyan will have to marry when she grows up. Can you afford a dowry with this amount of money? Even if you don't think for yourself, you have to think for Baoyan." The young woman was stunned and said bitterly in her heart, "I understand, but Chanda left. What can I do?" "Sai, there's a way." "Who said there's no way?" Madame Jiang immediately became excited, and she hurriedly said, "He. Look at Li Zixuan. He's still eating and drinking at home after losing the battle. His Majesty didn't punish him at all. Changde, Mingpeng, and the others were ordered by Li Zixuan to go through fire and water, but he's rich and has nothing to worry about. Is this fair?" The middle-aged woman's words were very harsh and could easily bewitch people. After hearing this, the young woman's heart began to waver. "It's not fair. This is definitely not fair. That's why the other families are all discussing going to Li Zixuan's house tomorrow morning to cause trouble. Even if they can't get His Majesty's attention and punish Li Zixuan for his crimes, they can still get more compensation from the Li family." "Aunt Jiang, this isn't good. I heard that many soldiers died in the battle this time. Even if the Li family is willing to pay, it can't be that much, right?" Aunt Jiang raised her orchid fingers and said with a smile, "Haha, silly child, you're thinking too much. Do you know how much money the Li family has? Even if all 200 families go over, the Li family can still afford it. You know about Li Zixuan's wedding last month, right? The cost of that wedding was more than 100,000 strings of cash. More than 100,000 strings of cash? So much? The young woman covered her mouth in surprise. A hint of smugness flashed across the middle-aged woman's eyes. Then she probed, of course. So, Shinha, do you want to go with them tomorrow to ask for an explanation? The young woman struggled for a moment and finally nodded. All right. That's good. That's good. We'll gather at Mingda's house tomorrow. We'll go to the Li family together to ask for an explanation. Li Zishuan caused so many families to lose men. How can he not pay the price? Chapter 519. How is it? Did she agree? In a private room of the Grand Hyatt restaurant, a black-robed man with a hood covering his face sat on the couch. He looked at the woman in red silk below and lowered his voice as he asked in a hoarse voice. Looking at the woman's appearance, it was the middle-aged woman, surnamed Jiang from before. She agreed. Although that girl is a bit stubborn, she was still convinced by me. The middle-aged woman said proudly. Clap, clap, clap. Very good. The black-robed man clapped his hands and praised. Then he asked, including this, you've already convinced 30 families, right? The middle-aged woman quickly nodded and said, Yes. Boss, you really have a good memory. Hee. Not bad. I'm very satisfied. Next, as long as you can persuade that family, I'll give you 10 times the reward. The black-robed man laughed and said, 10 times? Boss, tell me quickly. I'll definitely help you do it. Hearing that there was 10 times the reward, the middle-aged woman was afraid that she would miss such a good opportunity and quickly replied. The black-robed man shook his head and said, don't be in a hurry to agree. This family shouldn't be that easy to convince. Sigh. Boss, what you said is wrong. The middle-aged woman put her hands on her hips and said, I, Jiang Thua, don't have any other abilities, but this mouth of mine, if I say I'm second, no one dares to say they're first. So, boss, if you want me to persuade anyone, just say it. The black-robed man clapped his hands and laughed. Then you better listen carefully. Next, go to Zhao Siwei's house at Enlifeng. If you can convince his wife, Xiao Wanqing, to go with you tomorrow, I will give you 10 times the reward. Jiang Zuohua's face fell when she heard this, and she muttered, Ugh, Xiaqing. This, the black-robed man frowned and said, What's wrong? From what you said earlier, didn't you say that there was no one you couldn't convince? Jiang Zuohua quickly waved her hand and said, No, it's not like that. Boss, although this Xiao Wanqing has a stubborn temper, it's still all right. The hardest to talk to is her mother-in-law. If that old madam knew that I asked Xiao Wanqing to do this, she would definitely use her walking stick to chase me away. 15 times. The black-robed man did not say much and directly increased the price. Gulp. Jiang Zuehua swallowed her saliva. She was calculating how much the reward was worth. Boss, this isn't about money. 20 times. Without any hesitation, the black-robed man increased the price once more. Deal. Boss, don't add more. Don't worry, even if I, Jiang Zuohua, have to go through water and tread on fire, I will do what you asked me to do. Just you wait and see. And Jiang, you're here. Happy Lane, Zhao Siwei's residence. Xiao Wanqing had just added an incense stick to the memorial tablet when she saw someone walk in from the courtyard. That's right. I'm here to pay my respects to Lieutenant Zhao. Wanqing, do you still smell good? Let me light some incense for Siwei. Jiang Zuohua walked over quickly and said with a smile, Yes, and Jiang, thank you for coming to see Siwei. At this time, only she and Jiang Zuohua were in the courtyard. As for the old and the young, they couldn't withstand the hot weather and had returned to their rooms to rest. Sigh. We're neighbors. What are you thanking me for? It's just that Siwei was such a good young man. He finally entered the guards and even became a lieutenant. He had a bright future ahead of him. How could he be gone just like that? Jiang Zuehua said with a regretful expression. Then she took the incense stick, lit it, and bowed 3 times to the memorial tablet. Finally, she placed it on the incense table. Hearing Jiang Zuehua mention Zhao Siwei, Xiao Wanqing couldn't help but start sobbing softly. Jiang Tsuehua quickly came over to support her and comforted her. Hey, 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 don't cry, Wanqing. It's Aunt Jiang's fault. Aunt Jiang shouldn't have mentioned Si Wei. Boo-hoo. It's not your fault, Aunt Jiang. I couldn't help it. Boo-hoo. Mother is already so old, and Wonder is still so young. With Si Wei gone, I really don't know how I'm going to live in the future. It would have been better if she didn't say it. Now that she said it, Xiao Wanqing couldn't stop crying. Sigh. Wanqing, don't cry, don't cry. Our lives still have to be lived slowly. All right, didn't the imperial court give us a pension? That money should be enough, right? Xiao Wanqing wiped away her tears and said, Yes, there's a pension. Although that money is enough for our family to live for a lifetime, I didn't give birth to a son for Si Wei when he was alive, who will inherit the family business in the future. Jiang Tsuehua was shocked. She didn't expect that the imperial court would give Zhao Siwei's family such a generous pension. It was actually enough for a family to live for a lifetime. If that was the case, she couldn't persuade Xiao Wanqing like she did with the others. Actually, this was very easy to understand. As the commander of Dugu Xian's personal guards and the first lieutenant of the imperial army, Zhao Siwei was the highest-ranking soldier among the 215 soldiers who sacrificed themselves this time. His pension and reward would naturally be the highest, but the other ordinary soldiers definitely couldn't be given according to this standard. Otherwise, no matter how rich the imperial court was, they would still go bankrupt. At Wanqing, you still have to restrain your grief. Si Wei's spirit in heaven will also be happy to see your family living well. Jiang Tsuehua was helpless and could only think of another way. Xiao Wanqing shook her head and said, But I didn't even see my husband for the last time. My husband was wise all his life, but now he's dead without a corpse. I feel very uncomfortable in my heart. Jiang Tsuehua's eyes flashed with an imperceptible light as she said, Sigh. Speaking of which, it's strange. This time, a total of 215 imperial guards died in battle, but many family members didn't receive the bodies of their loved ones. They only received a notice of death from the Ministry of War. Xiao Wanqing raised her head and asked, Why is that? Aunt Jiang, can my husband's body still be sent back? Jiang Tsuehua pretended to be troubled and said, Sigh. What else could it be? Isn't it because Li Xianan brought the imperial guards to attack Snake Spirit Mountain? The mountain path up there is steep, and it would take a lot of effort to transport the corpses of the soldiers back. Li Xianan was probably afraid of trouble, so he didn't bring them back. What? A trace of anger flashed across Xiao Wanqing's face. She stood up and said, Is it because Li Xianan was afraid of trouble that he didn't bring my husband's body back? How could he do that? This is just my guess. However, this time, when the Imperial Guards attacked Snake Spirit Mountain, the people outside all said that Li Zishuan's command was improper, causing the army to return in defeat and heavy casualties. If it wasn't for him, there definitely wouldn't have been so many casualties. Aunt Jiang, are you serious? Xiao Wanqing pulled Jiang Tsuehua's hand and asked anxiously. Of course. Wanqing, if you don't believe me, Aunt Zhao will accompany you to the Li residence to question Li Zishuan tomorrow. Chapter 520. Heartless Villager, pay with your life for my husband. Heartless villager, pay with your life for my husband. On this day, early in the morning, 40 to 50 women wearing mourning clothes gathered at the entrance of the Li family in Yongla Lane, loudly shouting slogans. The strange clothes and special slogans of this group quickly attracted a large number of onlookers. The Li family should have been established in Chang and city for at least 20 years. Before Li Zishuan was born, the Li family led by Li Jingmao was a true merchant family. But unlike most of the rich and heartless merchants who valued profit over righteousness, Li Jingmao and Mrs. Li had always insisted on being kind to others. Except for their business competitors, almost no one hated the Li family. In the Yongla Lane area, and even in the neighboring areas, the Li family's reputation were excellent. Later, the son of the Li family, Li Zishuan, returned from Mount Longhu and made many outstanding achievements, being conferred the title of Baron. The head of the Li family also became Li Zishuan. Under the leadership of Li Zishuan, the Li family still adhered to the principle of being kind, especially to the poor farmers and the children of humble families, bringing great benefits. The Li family's reputation among the people also rose to another level. Now, a group of women gathered at the entrance of the Li family's residence to make a crusade. Many people felt it was inconceivable, and the onlookers kept increasing. They all pointed at the women in front of them and talked about them. Hey, whose daughters-in-law are they? Why are they wearing mourning clothes and coming to the Li family to make trouble? Hey, I don't know. From what they're saying, it seems like Lord Li killed their husbands. How is that possible? Lord Li and Lord Li are both good people. How could they do such a wicked thing? Hey, I know her. Isn't that Chanda's wife? But why is she wearing mourning clothes? I heard that Chanda was on duty in the Imperial Army. But in the Battle of Snake Spirit Mountain 2 days ago, the Imperial Army was defeated by the 7 Cultivators sect and could only retreat to the foot of the mountain. The Imperial Army also suffered heavy losses. Could it be that Changda unfortunately died in the battle? If that's the case, then aren't these mourning women the widows of the soldiers who died in the Snake Spirit Mountain the day before yesterday? No wonder they came all the way here to cry. Li Xianan was one of the main generals in the Battle of Snake Spirit Mountain. You can't say that, right? Which general has never lost a battle? You can't put all the blame on Lord Li just because of one defeat, right? Dear neighbors, the husbands of these poor women are all Imperial Army soldiers who died in the battle on Snake Spirit Mountain. They died because of Li Xianan's improper command. We came here this time for no other reason than to ask the Li family to give them some compensation. After all, the pillar of their family is gone. In the future, they will have to live as widows and orphans. How can they live without money? Everyone, please be the judge. Are we asking for too much? Today, Jiang Tsuhua was also among the crowd that came to cause trouble. When she saw that many people had gathered around, she turned around and said to the crowd with a sorrowful expression. Her act of pretending and playing the sympathy card really did arouse the sympathy of many people. So it's like this. If that's the case, it's not too much. It's not too much. Li Xianan's family doesn't lack money. When Jiang Tsuhua saw that the time was right, she continued to lead the women around her and shouted, "Black-hearted county man, you are heartless. Pay for my husband's life. Black-hearted county man, you are heartless. Pay for my husband's life." As soon as Jiang Tsuhua's voice fell, the group of women also quickly shouted, "Black-hearted county man, you are heartless. Pay for my husband's life." Some of the onlookers heard their miserable cries and couldn't help but sympathize with them. As a result, the shouting in front of the Li family's residence became louder and louder. With such a big commotion, it was impossible for the Li family not to notice. In fact, when Jiang Tsuhua brought the group of soldiers' widows over, the gatekeepers of the Li family's residence, Sanbao and Fu, already noticed. It wasn't that the two of them didn't try to reason with them, but Jiang Tsuhua was eloquent and insisted that Li Zishuan personally come out to settle the compensation for everyone. Sanbao had no choice but to let Fu stand guard at the door while she went to the courtyard to report to Li Jingma and Madame Li. "Master, Madam, not good, not good. There are a lot of women causing trouble outside." It was about 7:15 in the morning. Li Jingma, Madame Li, and Han Yushi's family of 3. Originally, it was a family of 6, but Li Zishuan and Iron Egg were all not at home. Were eating breakfast in the front hall. Suddenly, they heard Sanbao shouting outside. The 3 of them quickly put down their bowls and chopsticks. When Sanbao came in, Li Jingma asked first, "Sanbao, what did you say? There are people causing trouble outside the residence?" Sanbao took a deep breath and answered, "Yes, master, there are 40 to 50 women outside the door. They said they want to see young master and ask him for compensation." This brat. Li Jingma's face turned green. When he heard Sanbao's words, he subconsciously thought that Li Zishuan had gotten himself into trouble outside. Thus, He couldn't help but look at his daughter-in-law guiltily. What should he do? His son had wronged his daughter-in-law. Who should he speak up for later? Han Yushi was stunned, but she didn't say anything. In front of the two elders, she wouldn't purposely interrupt. It wouldn't be too late to interrupt after she fully understood the ins and outs of the matter. Compensation? What compensation? Sanbao, have you asked clearly? Madame Li didn't believe that her son would do such a thing outside. She first rolled her eyes at Li Jingma, then looked at Sanbao and asked, Madam, the black-hearted county man is heartless. Pay with your life for my husband. Sanbao was about to explain when a deafening shout came from outside. Madame Li's expression changed. She slammed the table and said coldly, "Umph. Where did this wicked woman come from? My son is upright and upright. I want to see who is pestering endlessly and ruining my Xian Er's reputation." With that, Madame Li stood up and was about to leave. Mother, wait. At this moment, Han Yushi hurriedly stopped Madame Li and said, Mother, they're just a group of pitiful people. Let me go. I will settle this matter. Okay. The two of you should have a good meal first. Madame Li stopped in her tracks and looked back at Han Yushi. After hesitating for a moment, she nodded and said, Okay, I'll leave it to you. Mother and your father both support you. Chapter 521. The reason why Mrs. Li agreed to let Han Yushi go out to solve this matter was mainly out of respect for this daughter-in-law. She felt that this family would be handed over to her son and daughter-in-law sooner or later. It might not be a bad thing to let Han Yushi go out to train now. The reason why Han Yushi took the initiative to take on this heavy responsibility was mainly because she heard the group of women outside shouting, The black-hearted county man is heartless. Pay with your life for my husband. She immediately thought of the matter that everyone in Chang and City had been discussing for the past 2 days, that Li Zixuan had lost the battle. She felt that this matter was not simple. If it was not handled properly, it would bring a lot of trouble to Li Zixuan. Therefore, she took the initiative to take on this task. The black-hearted county man is heartless. Pay with your life for my husband. When Han Yushi arrived at the door of the mansion, it was when the group of women outside were shouting the loudest. Her eyes scanned the crowd slightly and instantly saw who was leading this group of people. Some schemes immediately surfaced in her mind. In an alley opposite the Li mansion stood a man in black wearing a bamboo hat. When he saw Han Yushi coming out from behind the door, he sneered and said, Humph, this Li Zixuan is just SOSO. After such a big thing happened, he actually only let a woman come out to do it perfunctorily. I don't know if you're confident or incompetent. Forget it. You're courting death. Originally, I didn't expect to use this matter to kill you. But now that you look down on this matter so much, you should be prepared to have a bad reputation. At the same time, the crowd in front of the Li mansion saw Han Yushi come out and also made a commotion. Hey, someone from the Li mansion is here. Isn't this the wife of the Li County man? Why didn't the Li County man come out personally? Neighbors, please be quiet. If you have anything to say, you can sit down and talk slowly. Although Han Yushi's clear voice could not be heard by everyone, most people still heard it. As the saying goes, even if you don't give face to the monk, you have to give face to the Buddha. Li Zixuan's previous impression of him was extremely good. Many of the onlookers quieted down, and those who continued to shout slowly quieted down. Seeing this, Han Yushi said generously, Sisters, neighbors, everyone has been standing for so long. You must be tired and thirsty. Let's not care about anything else. Let's sit down and drink some water first before we talk about things. How about that? Everyone was stunned. They did not expect Han Yushi to speak to them like this. Shouldn't the Lord and Madam be high and mighty? Seeing that no one replied to her, Han Yushi was not annoyed. She smiled and instructed Sanbao. Sanbao, quickly arrange for someone to give everyone here a bowl of iced warmth and a cushion. In this era, although there were already stools, there were still many people who usually knelt on cushions or brocade couches. There were at least 100 people in front of her. It was not realistic for the Li residents to take out so many stools in such a short time. Han Yushi thought about it, and could only let San Bao get the cushions. "Yes, young madam," San Bao responded, and was about to enter the door. "Wait." Jiang Tsuhua, who was caught off guard by Han Yushi's strange move, walked out of the crowd and stopped her. With rich experience in fighting, she knew that in a negotiation, the one who had the initiative would get the biggest benefits. Han Yushi waved her hand and motioned for San Bao to go in quickly. Then, she looked at Jiang Tsuehua and asked, "May I ask who this aunt is?" "I'm Jiang Tsuehua. I'm not worthy of being called aunt by Lord and Madam." Jiang Tsuehua pretended to be polite and said, "Madam Zhu, there's no need for you to spend money. These are all poor people who lost their husbands in the battle on Snake Spirit Mountain 2 days ago. They're here today to seek justice from Li Xianan. So, Madam Zhu, please ask Li Xianan to come out." Han Yushi shook her head gently and said, "I'm sorry. My husband is not at home at the moment. His Majesty has sent troops to attack the 7 cultivators of true virtue for the second time. My husband is trying to find a way to destroy the 7 cultivators of true virtue at the smallest cost and avenge the soldiers who died in the battle. Yushi is sad about the unfortunate experience of my sisters. If I were in your shoes, I believe I would be even more miserable than you. Today, let's not talk about right and wrong. Since you are all guests, please drink some water to cool down. Then we can sit down and have a good talk." At this moment, the maids and servants of the Li residence came out of the door one after another with wine bowls and futons. Looking at the pink and gentle land that was emitting a cool air, many people couldn't refuse anymore. Although it was still early in the morning, it was still very hot in the summer. The women who had been shouting slogans were the ones who felt it the most. The weather was hot to begin with, and they had been shouting for so long. It would be a lie to say that they weren't thirsty. Moreover, the sight of the warm and gentle land in front of them made them salivate. No one could resist its attraction. Hey, don't drink." Jiang Tsuehua saw that most people had picked up their wine bowls and started to taste the warm and gentle land. She couldn't help but feel anxious. As the saying goes, one's eyes blind one's eyes. They were here to collect debts. How could they drink other people's wine in front of other people's homes? However, no one listened to her at this time. What the hell is this? Jiang Tsuehua stomped her feet in anger. Then, she picked up her wine bowl and drank. Drinking this warm and gentle land is really cool and thirst-quenching. Cough, cough. We've drunk this water and sat down. Lord Zhu, madam, can we talk about business now? After a while, Jiang Tsuehua licked her lips and asked embarrassedly. She was still thinking about the warm and gentle land that she had just drunk. She had never drunk this kind of thing before. Han Yushi swept a glance at the crowd. Seeing that most of them had calmed down and weren't as irritable as before, she heaved a sigh of relief. When she heard Jiang Tsuehua's question, she smiled and said, "Of course, but what?" Jiang Tsuehua was overjoyed. She thought that Han Yushi was in trouble. "But before that, sisters, please allow me to tell you about the decision that my husband made." Han Yushi ignored Jiang Tsuehua and looked at the 40 to 50 women in mourning clothes in front of her. She said in a deep voice, "The Battle of Snake Spirit Mountain was far more unfavorable to the Imperial Army than you imagined. In the end, they were unfortunately defeated, causing 215 heroic souls to be buried here forever. My husband blamed himself deeply for this and couldn't sleep for the entire night. He had already decided that the Li family would provide for the lives of these sacrificed soldiers and their families in the future. Putting aside the compensation from the imperial court, the Li family will give every soldier's family members 10 strings of money every year. If you're willing, you can send the children of the soldiers to study in the Yanwang Academy in the future. There will be no fees. My husband originally planned to inform everyone of this decision after the Imperial Army completely annihilated the 7 cultivators of true virtue. At the same time, I also wanted to comfort your husband's soul in heaven. But since you've come to find me, I'll inform you in advance. My husband has a clear conscience and only wants to live up to his conscience. Chapter 5:22. Han Yushi's words completely turned the passive situation into an active one. If Li Zixuan were here, he would definitely give his wife 32 likes. Every family can get 10 strings of money every year. When the people below heard Han Yushi's words, they could not help but start whispering to each other. Among them, most of them had come here to seek money. Now that Han Yushi had given such a generous compensation plan, almost no one was dissatisfied. Lord Li is so generous. This is really generous. Yes, every family gets 10 strings of money every year. No matter what, it's enough to live. Tisk tsk. Just based on these conditions, I want to work for Lord Li. Hee. I told you that Lord Li is kind-hearted and wouldn't do such a thing that goes against his conscience. How about it? I was right? You guys just had to blindly follow along. Yes. Boss Mao, you're right. We were the ones who didn't distinguish between right and wrong. Madam Zhu, we've all let you down. Yes, Madam Zhu, we've let you down. We shouldn't have followed along. Not only the martyrs' widows, but even the surrounding onlookers felt that the compensation plan offered by the Li family was very generous. Some people even wished that they could replace it with themselves. Han Yushi retreated in order to advance and turned the passive into active. In an instant, she turned the unfavorable situation around. Jiang Tsuhua, who was in the crowd, saw this, and her expression became extremely ugly. Now, she and this group of women had indeed achieved their goal of asking the Li family for money. However, the Li family taking the initiative to give it and them taking the initiative to ask for it were two completely different concepts. Han Yushi's actions completely ruined her established plan, to completely ruin Li Zixuan's reputation in the name of asking for money. However, looking at the reaction of the surrounding crowd, she knew that not only was Li Zixuan not ruined, but it also gained a good reputation for being benevolent and righteous. Madame Zhu is really benevolent. I just don't know how long the Li family can give them the 10 strings of money every year. The more Jiang Tsuhua thought about it, the angrier she got. Suddenly, she thought of a flaw and asked. In her opinion, each family earned 10 strings of cash a year. More than 200 families would earn more than 2,000 strings of cash. She did not believe that the Li family would be willing to maintain such a large expenditure for a long time. A cold light flashed through Han Yushi's eyes. Jiang Tsuhua was polite on the surface, but her words were targeted at the Li family. This made Han Yushi feel a little angry. She glanced at Jiang Tsuhua with a deep meaning and said, Jiang Tsuhua, you're the Li family. Annie Jiang, that's a good question. Our Li family intends to give each family a pension of 10 strings of coins for 50 years. A total of 107,500 strings of cash. Within half a year, my husband and I will raise this sum of money and hand it over to the imperial court. The Ministry of Revenue will distribute it to everyone every year. This way, no matter whether the Li family is rich or poor 50 years later, the pension money for the families of the soldiers will not be lacking. After learning new mathematics for so long, Han Yushi effortlessly calculated the total amount of pension for the 215 martyrs for 50 years. When the onlookers heard that, there was a commotion. Although they felt that the previous 10 strings of cash was a lot, it was still within their acceptable range. Now that they heard that the Li family was going to take out more than 100,000 strings of cash, this was really an eye-opener for them. Good. Lord Li is generous. Lady Zhu is generous. What the F***CK? More than 100,000 strings of cash. Lord Li is really unparalleled. That's right. Today, these women blocked the Li family's door to cause trouble. It's really too much. Fortunately, Lady Zhu is magnanimous. Not only did she not mind, but she also repaid evil with good. It's really rare. That's the truth. Under Han Yushi's step-by-step attacks, the scales of victory had already begun to tilt towards the Li family. The martyrs' widows in the field were pointed at by the surrounding people. Many people did not dare to raise their heads to look at Han Yushi again. A person lives with a face, a tree lives with a piece of skin. In fact, most of them did not have such a big grudge against Lisa Xuan and the Li family. It was mainly because Jiang Cuihua used some bewitching words to trick them into causing trouble. Now, in front of the Li residents, not only did Han Yushi not speak ill of them, but she also gave them iced warm drinks and clean and soft cushions to sit on. This eased the hostility in their hearts by a lot. In the end, Han Yushi did not need them to say anything. Instead, she took the initiative to give them such a generous pension plan. While they were satisfied, they also felt a lot of guilt. They kept feeling that they were the villain in this matter. Madam and Lord Ju are benevolent, but my family doesn't want money. I only want my husband's bones. I beg Madam and Lord Ju to fulfill my wish. Just when Han Yushi thought that the matter was about to be resolved satisfactorily, she saw a delicate woman in mourning clothes stand up and say, "Yes, yes, yes. Madam Ju, why didn't the Ministry of War send back the corpses of the soldiers in the Battle of Snake Spirit Mountain this time? How sad do you think it is for them to die without seeing their corpses?" Jiang Cuihua's eyes lit up as she quickly jumped out and said, "Humph." Han Yushi's face turned cold as she said to Jiang Cuihua coldly, "I wonder if any of the 215 soldiers who died are your family members, Aunt Jiang." Jiang Cuihua's old face darkened as she said weakly, "This cough, no. Since no, then why is Aunt Jiang more anxious than these people? Can I understand that these people were all instigated by Aunt Jiang to come and ruin our Li family's reputation?" The voice of Han Yushi, who had been speaking in a gentle voice earlier, suddenly became stern. Her beautiful face was also covered with dark clouds. Jiang Cuihua panicked, but she was an experienced person after all. After taking 2 breaths, she hurriedly explained, "Madam Ju, that's not right. Justice is in the human heart. Jiang Cuihua, saw that these people who lost their husbands were pitiful, so I stood out to help them. How did I instigate them to ruin your family's reputation? I'm doing this for the public good." "Ha! Eager for justice?" Han Yushi sneered, then walked to the delicate woman in white who had stood up earlier and asked softly, "May I know your name?" The delicate woman bowed and answered, "I am Xiao Wanqing. My husband is Zhao Siwei, a lieutenant of the Imperial Army and the captain of General Dugu's personal guards." Han Yushi was slightly shocked. The night before, Lisa Xuan had briefly explained the battle on Snake Spirit Mountain to her. At the last moment, Zhao Siwei had led the remaining Imperial Army guards and used his life to give Lisa Xuan, Dugu Exen, and the others a chance to retreat. Han Yushi remembered this matter deeply in her heart. Chapter 523. "So it's Sister Wanqing. Sorry for the disrespect." Han Yushi bowed solemnly to Xiao Wanqing and said, "Sister Wanqing, I've heard about your husband from my Lord Ju. I'll tell you in detail later. Now, please tell me, did Aunt Jiang call you here?" When Jiang Cuihua heard this, she panicked and said, "Madam Ju, did I ask you a question?" "I'm asking Sister Wanqing. If you don't have a guilty conscience, please shut up." Han Yushi mercilessly interrupted her immediately. Anyone could hear the coldness in her words. Seeing that Han Yushi was about to get angry, Xiao Wanqing also panicked a little. After all, the difference in status was obvious. She hurriedly said in a low voice, "Madam, this Wanqing came here today without consideration, but it was definitely not to ruin Lord Ju's reputation. I just wanted to, all right, Sister Wanqing, I know you don't have any ill intentions. I just want to ask you, were you urged by Aunt Jiang to come here?" Han Yushi smiled and patted Xiao Wanqing's shoulder as she said gently, "This." Xiao Wanqing looked at Jiang Cuihua hesitantly, not knowing how to answer. Han Yushi immediately understood in her heart. She said in a deep voice, "Sister Wanqing, you all know my husband's attitude towards you. Put yourself in my shoes. You have to treat me with sincerity as well. Besides, if anything goes wrong today, both you and our Li family will only suffer losses. No one will be able to gain any benefits. So, have you never thought that you were being used by someone with ulterior motives?" Xiao Wanqing was startled. When she thought of the whole thing, she felt more and more that someone was manipulating today's farce. Little girl, don't slander me. I just pity these women who lost their husbands. I'm here to seek justice for them. Seeing that the matter was about to be exposed, Jiang Tsuhua simply shed all pretense of cordiality and directly called Han Yushi a little girl. Hee hee, justice? Han Yushi laughed instead of getting angry and said, let's not talk about justice first. Jiang Tsuehua, are you admitting that these widows of the Imperial Guards were all urged by you? So what if I am? Justice for one person is the same as justice for 50 people. What's wrong with me calling all of them over? Jiang Tsuehua stiffened her neck and argued. Ha! Does this mean that you, Jiang Tsuehua, are here today to seek justice for the 50 widows of the soldiers? And you're not even taking a single cent? Han Yushi sneered. Then she looked at the crowd that was gathering around her and said loudly, Dear neighbors, I, Han Yushi, have just married into the Li family for less than a month. I don't know what kind of character Jiang Tsuehua had in the past, but I believe everyone present knows very well. Who thinks that she will be selfless, do her best, and seek justice for others without taking a single cent? If anyone thinks so, please step forward, straight to the root of the problem. Han Yushi's words directly hit Jiang Tsuehua's vital point. The onlookers also saw that today's matter was a little unusual, and they all whispered below. I know this Jiang Tsuehua. Not only is she stingy, but she also likes to take advantage of small things. I heard that the eggs laid by the hens of blacksmith Wang next to her house are often stolen. I don't know if it has anything to do with Jiang Tsuehua. It's most likely related. Earlier, when I saw you guys making a fuss, I felt that something was wrong. Now that I heard Madame Ju's analysis, I finally know what's wrong. This Jiang Tsuehua is eating and drinking well, but her mother-in-law can only eat and drink. How can such an unfilial woman be so kind to seek justice for others? There must be something fishy behind this. Yes. I also heard that Jiang Tsuehua doesn't give her mother-in-law food. Hiss, do you guys think that there's someone behind Jiang Tsuehua? It must be. Lord Li treats people so well and even gave so many good things to poor people like us. There must be someone who can't stand it and deliberately used this despicable method to smear Lord Ju. Yes. These women who came to cause trouble are all accomplices. Yes, accomplices. Accomplices who can't distinguish between right and wrong. Chang'an's city wasn't big, but it wasn't small either. The people who lacked entertainment loved to gossip. When something happened, half of Chang'an's city would know about it. Therefore, after a while, Jiang Tsuehua's background was turned upside down. As the people discussed, Jiang Tsuehua's old face became darker and darker. The martyr's widow kneeling on the ground didn't look good either. Although the mastermind of the whole thing was Jiang Tsuehua, if they really wanted to talk about it, they were Jiang Tsuehua's accomplices. Madam, we were all persuaded by Aunt Jiang. We didn't plan to come at first. Yes. We were just at home yesterday to prepare for our husband's funeral. Then, Aunt Jiang came over and told us that this time on Snake Spirit Mountain, it was Lord Li's mistaken command that caused our husband to die. She wanted us to come to the Li residence today to seek justice. Yes, Madame Ju, we were all invited by Aunt Jiang. A martyr's widow stood up and told the truth. Then, many people followed suit, and the truth gradually surfaced. Han Yushi sneered and said, Jiang Tsuehua, what else do you have to say? Jiang Tsuehua knew that this was bad. She looked around and saw that there were people everywhere. She couldn't run even if she wanted to. It was funny that she couldn't wait for more people to come. Now, it seemed that she was digging her own grave. No matter what, these people's husbands died on Snake Spirit Mountain. It must have something to do with Li Xianan. Also, why couldn't the soldiers' bones be brought back? Isn't Li Xianan responsible for this? Jiang Tsuehua had no choice but to fight to the death. She felt that even if she was caught and brought to the Supreme Court, she had to drag Li Zishuan down. That way, the mysterious person who was looking for her might be able to save her Humph. You self-righteous, stupid woman. Facing Jiang Suehua's dying counterattack, Han Yushi was not afraid at all. She looked at Xiao Wanqing below and said, "The battle on Snake Spirit Mountain was a nightmare for all the sisters here. Originally, I didn't want to reopen this scar, but if I don't make things clear today, I'm afraid that everyone's misunderstanding of the Leaf family will become deeper and deeper. In order to prevent everyone's pain of losing their husbands from being used by despicable people, Yushi has offended you today. Next, I will tell everyone in detail what happened to the Imperial Army on Snake Spirit Mountain the day before yesterday." Chapter 524. My husband, General Dugu, and his younger brother worked together to get rid of the snakes and fought against the sect master of the Seven Cultivators sect, Enbatian. After a bitter battle, Enbatian was seriously injured and victory was in sight. Who would have thought that an elder of the Seven Cultivators sect would release a 3-zhang-long seven-headed serpent with infinite strength and venom all over its body? It was impossible for it to be invincible. Under the critical situation, my husband ordered Dugu Feng to lead the army to retreat first. He and General Dugu led the remaining Imperial Guards to entangle the seven-headed serpent and buy time for the army. Later, the seven-headed serpent went berserk several times, causing the remaining Imperial Guards to suffer heavy casualties. At the last moment, the captain of the Imperial Guards, Zhao Siwei, led the remaining Imperial Guards to fight the seven-headed serpent, wanting to create an opportunity for General Dugu and my husband to escape. My husband couldn't stop him, but he didn't want the soldiers to die in vain. He could only retreat with General Dugu. Recalling Li Zexuan's narration of the near-death experience, Han Yushi's eyes couldn't help but turn red. She looked at the more than 50 martyrs' widows in mourning clothes in front of her and said in a deep voice, "The battle of Snake Spirit Mountain was like this from beginning to end. What I said just now is absolutely true. The more than 3,000 Imperial Guards who survive can testify for me. My husband and I feel deeply guilty for the unfortunate deaths of my sister's husbands in this battle. But if you say that my husband is the only one to blame for this battle, Yushi will never agree. The terrain of Snake Spirit Mountain, the poisonous miasma, the peak Grandmaster level martial artists, and the seven-headed serpent were all unfavorable factors. If it were any other general who was in command and had the same number of troops, they would also be powerless. His Majesty and the other officials in the Imperial Court have already come to this conclusion. Jiang Tsuehua, today you are still speaking irresponsibly and slandering my husband's reputation. Are you more wise than the officials in the Imperial Court and the current His Majesty?" Han Yushi almost roared out the last sentence. It was fine for others to talk about her behind her back, but she would never allow anyone to speak ill of Li Zexuan. Jiang Tsuehua had already touched her bottom line today. Moreover, Jiang Tsuehua's way of using the grief of a martyr's widow to achieve her own sinister goals made her feel extremely disgusted. With Han Yushi's last shout, Jiang Tsuehua's face instantly turned pale. The surrounding crowd also fell into a dead silence. Regarding the battle on Snake Spirit Mountain, they had only heard about it through some rumors. They never thought that the real situation would be so dangerous. Especially when the seven-headed serpent appeared at the end of the battle. Li Zexuan chose to personally cover the retreat of the seven-headed serpent. This move moved everyone. Other people would say that a general success was built on the bones of thousands of soldiers. However, Li Zexuan, as a general, was able to achieve this step. No matter how picky a person was, they would not be able to find fault with him. Although they were defeated in the end, it could only be said that it was not their fault. In the end, the Imperial Army's personal guards who sacrificed themselves heroically said that they had bought time for Li Zexuan and Dugu Xian to retreat. However, weren't they also covering the retreat of the main army? Even if they did not sacrifice themselves, Li Zexuan and Dugu Xian would not have been in danger. However, more than 90% of the 4,000 Imperial Army soldiers would have died. Therefore, in other words, they did not die for Li Zexuan and Dugu Xian. They died in place of more than 3,000 brothers. Lord Ju is loyal and righteous. We have wronged Lord Ju. We deserve to die. A white-haired old man cupped his hands at Han Yushi and said in a trembling voice. Earlier, when he saw how pitiful these widows were, he followed suit and shouted a few slogans. Now that he heard Han Yushi's explanation, he immediately blamed himself. We have wronged Lord Ju. We deserve to die. Even such an old man could take the initiative to admit his mistake. How could the others have the nerve to continue being ostriches? Therefore, those who blindly followed suit and apologized. Everyone, you don't have to do this. You were just fooled by Jiang Suihua's flowery words. It's not your fault. The one who is truly guilty is Jiang Suihua. Han Yushi waved her hand at those people, then turned her head and ordered, Pang Sigi, bring her to the Supreme Court for interrogation. I want to see who is deliberately smearing my husband's name. As the head of the Li Residence's guards, Pang Feiji had already run out when he heard the commotion. When he heard Han Yushi's order, he quickly cupped his hands and said loudly, Yes, young mistress. After saying that, he waved his hand and said fiercely, Go, take her down. Stop. Jiang Tsuhua widened her eyes and said in panic, You can't take me down. I'm just helping them seek justice. I'm not guilty. I'm not guilty. You're guilty. At this moment, an angry snort came from outside the crowd. Everyone looked over and saw an old lady in black clothes walking over shakily with a walking stick. Mother, why are you here? Xiao Wanqing, who was in the crowd, turned pale with fright when she saw who it was. She hurriedly got up and wanted to help the old lady. If I didn't come, Siwei's reputation would be ruined. Wanqing, you're really muddle-headed. How could you believe Jiang Suihua's slanderous words? That's right, this old lady was Zhao Siwei's mother. According to custom, elders were not allowed to wear mourning clothes for the younger generation, so she only wore black clothes. At this moment, when Xiao Wanqing walked in front of her, the old lady did not intend to give her daughter-in-law any face in front of others. She sternly reprimanded her. Mother, son is wrong. Don't be angry. Xiao Wanqing's eyes were red. She quickly supported the old lady and said gently, I'll talk to you later. The old lady used her walking stick to knock on the ground, then shakily walked in front of Jiang Suihua. Without saying a word, she raised her walking stick and hit her. Jiang Suihua, you blabbermouth, I'll let you deceive my daughter-in-law. I'll let you ruin my Siwei's reputation. You're still asking for justice? My Siwei protected his master and was not afraid of death. Although his corpse is gone, he sacrificed his life for the country. Even if he died honorably. Why would he need a blabbermouth like you to seek justice? It was obvious that the old lady was very angry. Every time she hit with her walking stick, she used a lot of strength. When Jiang Tsuhua saw the old lady walking over, she already realized that something was wrong. She quickly ran away, not daring to resist at all. The ancients valued filial piety. Although Jiang Tsuhua occasionally dared to bully her mother-in-law at home, if she dared to hit such an old lady in front of so many people, then even if the bystanders came up and beat her to death on the spot, the imperial court would not punish them for their crimes. At this time, the old people's social status was quite high. She did not expect that even if she did not make a move, others would want to beat her to death. When the surrounding crowd heard the old lady's words, they could not help but cheer loudly. Good. What a good sacrifice for the country, even if he died honorably. The old lady is deeply righteous. Good job. Yes. Jiang Tsuehua deserves to die. She actually used the pain of someone else's husband to achieve her own unspeakable goals. She deserves to die. Beat her to death. Beat her to death. Go and help catch her. Don't let her escape. Brother Ji originally wanted the two marquis beside him to catch Jiang Tsuehua with both hands, but who knew that before he could give the order, the surrounding crowd had already made their move. Therefore, the old lady did not need to waste any effort to chase after her. She only needed to hit Jiang Tsuehua with her walking stick. In a short while, Jiang Zihua was beaten until her face was bruised and swollen, crying for her father and mother. Sob, sob, Siwei's mother, don't hit her. Don't hit her. I know I was wrong. Jiang Zihua tilted her head to prevent the walking stick from hitting her head as she cried and begged for mercy. Han Yushi saw that if she continued to hit her, she would die. She quickly came over and said, "Auntie, don't hit her anymore. I will send Jiang Zihua to the Supreme Court. She will be punished." Chapter 525. Mrs. Li, today's matter is the fault of my Zhao family. Wanqing's personality is simple, and she doesn't know much about the world. That's why she was bewitched by Jiang Zihua. Please don't hold a grudge in your heart. I apologize to you on behalf of Wanqing. The old lady also felt that she couldn't hit her too hard, so she put down her walking stick. She turned around and looked at Han Yushi with a guilty expression. After saying that, she even wanted to kneel down and beg for forgiveness. "Mother, no, all of this is my fault." Xiao Wanqing was shocked and quickly pulled the old lady back, not letting her kneel down. Han Yushi was also shocked. She ran over and held the old lady's hand, saying, "Mrs. Zhao, you don't have to do this. Your son and my husband can be considered brothers who fought side by side and shared life and death together. And you're so righteous. I can't even thank you enough. How can I blame you?" The old lady waved her hand and said stubbornly, "Mrs. Li, this matter isn't settled like this. Although my son has made contributions to the war under Lord Zhu, that's that. If my son knew that after he died, someone was still using his name to ruin Lord Zhu's reputation, my son would definitely die with a grievance. Lord Zhu loved his soldiers like his children. Siwei was a person who valued relationships and righteousness when he was alive. It was his honor to be able to serve under Lord Zhu. It was also his misfortune to die in battle on Snake Spirit Mountain. This old lady knows that Lord Zhu has already done his best. You don't owe this old lady anything. Instead, this old lady owes Lord Zhu." Han Yushi was both happy and heartbroken to meet such a righteous old lady. A white-haired person sending off a black-haired person. When the world could compare to this kind of grief. Old Lady Zhao could still maintain her rationality and understand things when she was in great sorrow. No one could compare to this kind of benevolence. "Mrs. Zhao, please don't say that. Sister Wanqing only believed the slanderous words of a villain. This was an unintentional mistake. My husband and I won't take it to heart. On the other hand, Mrs. Zhao, you're so righteous and helped my husband resolve the crisis. This junior still has to thank you. Shall he help Auntie Zhao into the house? It's hot outside." Han Yushi patiently comforted old Madame Zhao with a few words, and then wanted Xiao He to help the old lady into rest. The farce this morning had developed to this point. Basically, the crisis had been resolved, and Li Zixuan's reputation would not be affected because of this. Next was some finishing work. No, no, no. Madam Li, you're magnanimous enough to not bicker with us. But this old woman doesn't have the face to enter this door. You just said that you would give my family 10 strings of money every year. Don't mention this again. Siwei's spirit in heaven would definitely not agree. She only hoped that the Lord of the Supreme Court would severely punish Jiang Zihua, this gossipy woman who stirred up trouble. My son has already shed blood on the battlefield. We can't let him shed tears in the netherworld because of these villains who use his name to do whatever they want. Old Madame Zhao hurriedly refused. Then, she pointed at Jiang Zihua, who was being held down by everyone, and said hatefully, "Auntie Zhao is right. Punish me severely. Yes, don't let the name of a hero be used by villains. Punish the villain. Punish Jiang Zihua severely." Old Madame Zhao's words resonated with many people. The onlookers clapped their hands and cheered. The martyrs' widows who were kneeling on the ground felt embarrassed. Even an old lady in her 60s or 70s could be so righteous. In comparison, they seemed like villains. "Madam Zhu, our family doesn't want the 10 strings of money every year. If Chang's spirit in heaven knew that I did such a thing, he would definitely scold me in his dreams. Madame Ju, our family doesn't want the pension anymore. Previously, I listened to Jiang Suihua's rumors. I didn't mean to ruin Lord Ju's reputation. Our family doesn't want it either. We have offended you previously. Please forgive us, Madame Ju. Su Xinhe was the first to stand up. She wanted to decline the 10 strings of money every year that Han Yushi had mentioned earlier. Although without a man and a pillar of support, her future days would definitely be very difficult. However, if she took this kind of money, she would be criticized by others behind her back. Instead of living under the scolding of others for the rest of her life, Su Xinhe felt that it was better to work hard and live freely. If there was one, there would be a second. Some thin-skinned and kind-hearted women stood up one after another and declined Han Yushi. The remaining dozen or so sat on the mattress as if they were sitting on pins and needles. Their faces were burning. Han Yushi first smiled and said to old Madame Zhao, "Madame Zhao, don't worry. I will hand Jiang Suihua over to the Supreme Court and let them interrogate her properly. When my husband returns, he will also go to the Supreme Court to personally inquire about this matter." Then she said to the group of women, "As for the pension, it's a little token of appreciation for my husband and I. I hope that Madame Zhao and all the sisters won't refuse. Otherwise, my husband won't be able to sleep at night. Everyone, just treat it as helping my husband to fulfill one of his wishes. Yushi thanks you here." After saying that, Han Yushi faced the crowd and bowed graciously. "Io, no way, no." Old Madame Zhao hurriedly grabbed Han Yushi's arm and said, "How can you give money to others and still thank them? Madame Li, you're asking for too much." Han Yushi smiled and said, "Madame Zhao, what I said just now came from the bottom of my heart, so please help my husband with this. Besides, I heard that big brother Zhao has a daughter. Take this money as the dowry that we're giving to our daughter. That's right, Madame Zhao. If you don't accept this money, I reckon that my Lord Ju will personally send it to your residence when he returns, so you'd better accept it." Brother Ji, who was at the side, interrupted with a smile. Old Madame Zhao looked at her daughter-in-law awkwardly. After a while, she insisted, "No, we definitely can't accept this money. Even if Si Wei is here, he won't allow us to accept it. If we accept this money, our family will never be able to raise our heads in Chang'an City. Madame Li, you'd better not persuade her anymore. You and Lord Ju are both good people. Good people have good karma. I hope that the two of you can be rich for the rest of your lives." Han Yushi was helpless and could only say, "All right then, but thank you for your auspicious words, Madame Zhao." Since old Madame Zhao had said this, the other martyrs' widows also declined. "Madame Ju, Madame Zhao is right. If we accept this money, we won't be able to raise our heads for the rest of our lives. That's right. Lord Ju has done us a great favor. We were in the wrong in the first place today. No matter what, we can't ask for money anymore. That's right, that's right. We can't accept this money." Seeing this, Han Yushi could only say helplessly, "Since you're unwilling to accept it, then Yushi won't force you. However, if you encounter any difficulties in the future, feel free to look for me. You cannot accept the money, but it's still right for neighbors to help each other, right?" When the group of women heard this, they hurriedly bowed and thanked her. Han Yushi smiled and looked at everyone. "Now that the misunderstanding has been resolved, please disperse, sisters, neighbors, and all of you. Don't affect the other neighbors. Okay. Disperse, disperse. Madame Ju is really gentle, kind, virtuous, and righteous. That's right. County Lee's man has married a good wife. Haha, a talented man and a beautiful woman. This is a match made in heaven. Yes. A big show came to a successful end. Han Yushi's performance in it was really remarkable. These naturally fell into the eyes of those with ulterior motives. As the surrounding crowd dispersed, they praised Han Yushi repeatedly. On the steps in front of the mansion, Han Yushi looked at the miserable Jiang Suihua below and turned to Brother Ji. "Pang Sigi, I'll have to trouble you with her." Brother Ji cupped his hands obsequiously and said, "Hee. Don't worry, young madam. I have familiar brothers in the Supreme Court. I guarantee that I'll make this shrew spit out the person behind the scenes. Also, young madam, you can call me Xiao Pang in the future. Han Yushi, you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.